You're out of your mind. I told Sue, my sister, older by 2 years. I could never do anything like that, and neither would any normal guy. It happens all the time, she replied with an indifferent shrug of her shoulders. You might be surprised to find out just how many guys do it. Queers and pansies, sure, I sneered. But no normal guy would ever consider dressing up like a woman. Care to place a little wager on that, dear brother? Don't be ridiculous, I laughed. I'd be taking your money. What would you do to win? Walk up to a woman and ask if she was a guy? Just go ahead and bet me, Sue challenged. If I can't prove you wrong and make you admit it, we forget the whole thing. Write it off as a dumb joke. I can live with that, I grinned as I accepted what had to be a sucker bet. There was no normal man in the whole world that would willingly dress as a woman, I was certain of that. Can you live with losing? Sue asked, her voice trailing off mysteriously. You mean? Of course I mean, Sue said in earnest. Look, I'm trying to help you out here, and this seems like a really good way to do it. If I win, you and Craig agree to move in with me and Amy in California, and you get a job as a woman. But Craig. I suddenly realized that this bet was not just about me and Sue. I had a 16-year-old son who would be involved too. How could I possibly tell my son that the man he looked up to and respected was going to be wearing women's clothes? Things went into the crapper for my son and I when my wonderful wife Mary died a little more than a year ago. It was totally unexpected and left me so depressed that I let the company I had started go the dogs. I finally sold out, too devastated to care anymore. Craig's grades had plunged also, but there seemed little either of us cared to do to help ourselves. Sue had stepped in just in time. Craig was talking about dropping out, and our finances were at an all-time low. In a few months I would have to sell the house that meant so much to me when Mary was still alive. I still had Craig's love and respect though, that much I knew. How would losing this bet change all of that though? Why was I letting my foolish pride pull me into such a strange predicament? I wouldn't worry about Craig if I were you, Dave, Sue said with a laugh. He'll be just fine. Fine. It might send him over the edge. How could Sue be so callous, I wondered. Craig will be fine, you'll be fine, the whole world will be fine, Sue laughed. Now are you willing to bet or not? I shouldn't have done it. I realized that at the instant I accepted the bet, but Sue wasn't about to allow me to renege. Okay, you won't let me back out, but you're going to have to go pretty far to win this. I don't plan on just taking your word for it, I said bitterly. Far? Sue laughed. I don't have to go very far at all. As a matter of fact, let's start right here. Here? I asked, confused. What's here? Not what, who? Sue corrected me. And who is your dear son Craig, or should I call her Lori? What about Craig, and who is Lori? What in the world was she talking about, I wondered. How was she going to win her stupid bet with Craig? Your son is a perfect example of a normal guy who likes to dress as a girl, Sue announced triumphantly. He plays sports in school, acts like any other teenage boy, yet he also enjoys spending time as a girl named Lori. I listened closely as my sister explained that several years ago my wife had accidentally caught Craig wearing one of her nightgowns and a pair of panties. Craig was very upset, but Mary took it very calmly and had a long talk with him during which she learned that it wasn't the first time he'd worn her clothes. After hearing the whole story, Mary told him that she understood that he felt an overwhelming need to dress up like a girl occasionally and promised never to tell anyone as long as he didn't do anything that might call attention to himself. Mary had been keeping it a secret from me for several years, afraid that I wouldn't understand, Sue explained. Understand? My mind was spinning out of control. Of course I wouldn't understand, I still don't. Craig has always been a perfectly normal boy. He's on the swim team at school, he loves baseball, and the girls are crazy about him. Perfectly normal, you said so yourself, yet he wears girls' clothes. Sue grinned broadly and clapped excitedly. I win! Hold one misadjusted kid doesn't mean you win anything. I want real proof. A guy who no one would ever suspect does that sort of thing. I was sure I had her this time. I'd deal with Craig later. Would John do? Sue asked calmly. John, your fiancé John? I gasped. It couldn't be. John was practically the ideal man. His boyish good looks made him nearly irresistible to women, his skill with a pool cue or hunting rifle were legendary, and his knowledge of sports rivaled professional commentators. I'd known John since Sue brought him for Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. I'd gone hunting, fishing, and skiing with him, but I never suspected anything odd. That's right, little brother, Sue squealed in delight. He can hunt, he can fish, he can do anything any other man can do and do it better, yet he can also wear a pretty dress and have men drooling at the sight of him. Prove it, I demanded. How can I be sure you're not making this all up? Sue reached into her purse and removed an envelope. Opening it slowly, she removed a letter and some pictures which she handed to me. My hands shook as I looked at pictures of John in various stages of dressing and making himself up as a woman. This was my hunting buddy wearing a pair of high-cut panties and a matching bra. This was my fishing buddy in a lacy slip attaching nylons to the garter belt he was wearing. Finally, here was a man I was proud to know in a short black dress, curly blonde hair, perfectly made up, his long nylon-clad legs ending in a pair of black heels. Cute, isn't she? Sue broke my concentration and brought me plummeting back to reality. I picked up the letter and slowly read John's explanation of his dressing and assurance that he'd be there to help me every step off the way as I made the change into a woman. I didn't need to look at Sue to know that she was smiling. She had me beat and she knew it. When do I have to start? I asked weakly. And what about Craig? You're not working, so I thought it would be best to start right away. You can dress like a woman around the house. It's secluded so no one's going to see you. We'll explain everything to Craig when he gets home from school. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. Thrilled? With watching his father learn how to be a woman? I suppose I should have mentioned it. Sue laughed nervously. But John and I thought it would be best if Craig stayed behind. I can't leave him in Minnesota while I'm off in California. I shouted. I'm not going anywhere without him. When I said that Craig was staying, I should have explained myself better. Sue was avoiding my gaze for some reason, and I knew it always meant that she was up to something. You see, Craig is staying, but Lori will be coming along. It took a moment or so for the name Lori to register in my mind. Lori? You can't be serious. Yep, that all-American boy son of yours is going to become an all-American girl. With his pretty blonde hair and cute blue eyes, he'll be adorable. I felt terrible as I listened to Sue describe her plans for me and Craig. I hadn't been able to recover since Mary had died. Every place I looked, every place I went, everything I did reminded me of her. Sue knew that I had to get away if I was ever going to recover. She finally decided that bringing me to California to live with her and her daughter Amy would be just the change I needed. The only problem was that the area she lived in had very few job opportunities, especially for men. The want ads were overflowing with secretarial jobs and other traditionally feminine role jobs because so many of the young women wanted to move into previously male-dominated fields. Now the secretarial jobs were paying salaries unheard of in the past simply to attract qualified workers, male or female. Men, however, considered the jobs as women's work, and the women considered them to be beneath them when they too could become executives. The result was that there were no secretaries to assist the executives, who were now answering their own phones and typing their own letters, leaving little time to manage the businesses. She knew that I'd never consider becoming a secretary even as a male, since I too would consider it to be a woman's job. My pride would keep from taking a job with a lucrative paycheck, and eventually I'd end up as a security guard in some deserted warehouse with little income and less hope. That was when she thought about Craig and remembered his crossdressing. One thought led to another, which eventually led to thoughts about John, which led her to my current predicament. No one would know me in California, and no one knew she had a brother and not a sister. With a little work and some help from John, the first could become her sister. She knew that even if I initially objected to the idea, I was getting more desperate by the day. I couldn't hold out for long, so she simply waited for the right time to spring it on me. Her timing couldn't have been better. I was desperately seeking a way out of my depression, and her arguments were wearing me down. Everything had been all planned out, all I had to do was agree and my problems would be over. I'd be happier, I'd have a good job with a very good salary, I'd be with my sister and niece, both of whom I cared for, and if Sue was telling the truth, even Craig would be happy. I sighed deeply. If Craig agrees to it, you have yourself a sister. Sue and I spent the rest of the afternoon talking about what was going to happen and waiting for Craig to return home from school. He seemed happy to see Sue again. I wondered how long it would last. We have to talk about something, Craig. I smiled and motioned for him to sit next to Sue. How would you like to be able to spend your summer on the beach with Amy? That would be great, Dad. Craig replied enthusiastically. A whole summer just hanging out on the beach. In a bikini. Sue added as if an afterthought. She always did have a way of springing little surprises on people, but this time I wish she had waited. I wanted to explain everything one step at a time. Excuse me? Craig's head swiveled around to see Sue smiling at him. What did you say, Aunt Sue? She wants to know if you'd mind wearing a bikini to the beach. I moaned. You see, there's a catch to this little vacation. Me, wear a bikini? Craig shot back, obviously trying to hide his excitement. You're kidding, right? Your mom and I had some interesting conversations over the years, Craig. Sue smiled at her verbal checkmate. Or should I call you Lori? Want to talk about the underwear you keep in the back of the third drawer of your chest of drawers? I'm sorry, Dad, really I am. I don't know why I did it, but I'll never ever do it again. Tears ran down Craig's cheeks in a torrent. Calm down, Craig. I sat next to him and gave him a hug. Please pay attention and don't interrupt me because I have a lot of things to tell you. I then went on to explain all of what Sue had told me. After I finished explaining everything to Craig, he had a very confused look on his face, but I could hardly blame him for that, could I? You're serious, aren't you, Dad? We're really going to move in with Aunt Sue. You're going to be my mother and I'm going to be your daughter? When I nodded my agreement, Craig suddenly threw his arms around me and hugged me tightly. Dad, that sounds great, but I really don't know anything about being a girl. I just played around with some clothes. Sue assured him that by the time summer came he'd be a perfect girl and wouldn't give a thought to even wearing a bikini. The big grin on his face told me that he couldn't wait to get started. We started that day with Sue taking us on a shopping trip to pick up a few outfits. With Sue acting as a wife with her bored husband and son, we shopped in several of the local discount stores and a few major department stores until the trunk of my car was jammed with bags containing all sorts of feminine outfits. All sorts, that is, except for casual clothes. Sue insisted that we wear nothing but dressy outfits until we became comfortable with women's clothes. Only then would we be allowed to switch over to slacks and other casual wear. I went to bed that night wearing a short red nylon nightgown and matching panties. Craig, who loved the idea of wearing skirts and dresses at home, insisted on a pale blue cotton nightie that barely came to mid-thigh. The straps as well as the hem were trimmed in white lace, as were the leg holes on the matching panties. I tossed and turned, wondering what had possessed me to do such a crazy thing, while Craig fell fast asleep, a contented look on his face. The next morning at breakfast, Sue showed up in a very conservative pink nightgown, while Craig and I looked like a couple of hookers. Craig didn't seem to mind at all though, and was very happy when Sue complimented him on his nightie. He later left for school, a smile on his face, panties and girls' socks under his jeans. Sue had a great time picking out clothes for me as I bathed and shaved my legs and underarms. A pair of white nylon panties with a lace panel extending down the front with a matching bra, half-slip, and garter belt were waiting on my bed when I finished. As I threaded the garters down through my panties, I thought back to the times when I had watched Mary do it and how erotic I had thought it to be. Why then did it seem like such a silly thing to do now? Numbly I finished pulling down the garters, then rolled on the nylon Sue handed me and attached them to the tabs at the end of my garters. There, don't you feel sexy? Sue asked. Just imagine how sexy you'd look in a pretty dress with heels on. I don't feel sexy at all, I shrugged. I still think this is a stupid idea, but I don't have any other options right now. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, little sister, Sue giggled. Soon you'll find yourself looking forward to wearing something sexy under your outfits. It feels wonderful to wear something really frilly and sexy under your outfits. You're the only one who knows what you're wearing and it makes you feel so feminine and naughty. I don't see myself ever feeling that way. Now could we please get this over with? I pleaded, wanting to put something on even if it had to be a dress, just so that I wouldn't have to see the extra feminine lingerie I was wearing. In a bit, little sister, Sue teased. Now be a good girl and hold still for a moment or so. Sue took her time applying some type of gel to my newly shaved chest, then produced a pair of very realistic-looking fake breasts which she pressed firmly to my chest. Now hold them tight for about 30 seconds please, she instructed as she reached for the bra to complete my lingerie. 30 seconds or so later and I had breasts firmly attached to my chest and a bra being fastened around my chest. Finally, and to my relief, Sue helped me into a black and white striped sweater dress cut in such a way that combined with my new breasts made me look very physically attractive. What do you think? Sue asked hopefully. Still worried about people thinking you're a guy? Hell, I'm not even sure that there's guy under all this. I told her as I stared wide-eyed in amazement at the reflection in the mirror. Except for the short hair, even my facial features seemed feminine. You must have been very sure I'd go along to have had those fake breasts handy, I chided. What if I had refused? I sell for a living, remember? Sue said calmly. And I'm very good at what I do, you weren't going to refuse. Now sit over here while I do your makeup. I have to admit that I was sort of intrigued as I watched myself being made over. Ever since I was a teenager, I was absolutely amazed at the difference a girl could make in her looks with a little bit of makeup, and now that difference was happening to me. Sue seemed perfectly at ease with the chore of making me into a pretty woman. She applied liquid to my face, then powder to set it, outlined my lips with a lipstick pencil before filling them in with a lighter shade of lipstick, before applying blush and doing his eyes. As I sat transfixed by my image in the mirror, Sue disappeared for a few minutes only to reappear with a shoulder-length auburn wig in her hands. She was humming a happy tune as she placed the wig on my head and brushed out the curls to give it a very full look with a loose curl. The change was nothing short of astonishing. If I didn't know who the person in the mirror was, you would never have been able to convince me that I was looking at a man. The woman staring at me from the mirror had full lips that begged to be kissed. Her smoky brown eyelids and long curly lash brought out an innocence in her eyes, and her soft fluffy hair cried out to have fingers run through it. She looked soft, innocent, a woman to be cared for, yet she was all me. What do you think of yourself now, little sister? Sue was the type who fished for compliments whenever she did anything, and this was not going to be any different. There was no room for doubt. She had done an extraordinary job of making me look like a woman, but how in the world could I compliment her for that? I think you shouldn't let you do this to me, Sue. I tried to let her down easily. It's just not right. I'm a man, a father, for heaven's sake. You just can't change that. Bet me, was Sue's challenge. In just a few more weeks you won't think of yourself as anything other than a single woman and the mother of a teenage daughter. You'll see a pretty woman and compare yourself to her, wondering if your butt is as nice as hers, what you'd look like in the dress she's wearing, and if you should get your hair done like hers. It's not going to happen, Sue. I'll never think of myself as anything other than a man pretending to be a woman. We'll see, Sue said with a devilish gleam in her eyes. By the way, we can't call you Steve anymore. From now on your name is Jacqueline. Now let's get some shoes on and get started with your training. That was the end of it as far as Sue was concerned. She now had a younger sister named Jackie and a niece named Lori. Both her sister and her niece needed a lot of help in their development as women, and she was going to see that they got it. I'd go along if only because for some strange reason this was lifting my spirits. Soon I'd be leaving for sunny California, a new job, and a new life as a woman. It wasn't the type of job or life I wanted, but I found the idea to be sort of intriguing, and that was more than I'd felt about anything since Mary died. I slipped on a pair of low-heeled shoes Sue bought for me and allowed her to spray some of her favorite perfume on me. The perfume, she said, would act as a constant reminder that I was a woman now. No matter what I was doing, preparing dinner, matching a movie, or just relaxing and reading the paper, I'd smell the perfume and be instantly reminded of the change that I was undergoing. Sue helped clean up the breakfast dishes, but her helpfulness came at a price. The entire time that we worked she called me Jackie and insisted on complimenting me on how pretty I looked. With the dishes out of the way though, she instantly moved into high gear and began teaching me how to walk, sit and stand as a woman would. I must have walked the length of the first floor 50 to 60 times with my arms outstretched and parallel to the floor before Sue told me I could stop. Just as I was about to plop down on the sofa and kick off the dreaded heels that were causing my feet to ache, Sue insisted that I learn to walk up and down steps in a ladylike manner. Finally, after 25 trips up and down the steps, Sue told me to take a break. Exhausted, I flopped down on the couch, kicked off my heels and began to rub my feet. "Ladies do not sit like that," Sue bellowed. "Look at you, your skirt is up to your waist, your slip is showing, and you're going to put a run in your nylons if you're not careful. Get up and let's practice your sitting until you can do it like a lady instead of a truck driver in drag." It took all of my energy to put my heels back on, but I somehow managed, and after 35 tries at standing and smoothing out my skirt, sitting and smoothing out my skirt, pulling my skirt down to keep my slip from showing, then crossing my legs like a woman, I was finally allowed to gracefully sit down, remove my shoes and gently massage my feet. My relief was brief, however, and soon it was back to walking and sitting practice until it was time for lunch. Sue freshened up my makeup and wig, then hit me with a shot that took my breath away. "Come on, Jackie," she laughed. "Let's pick up something for lunch." A feeling of panic swept over me. I'm not going out in these clothes, someone's bound to notice. We'll just go to the drive-thru, you won't need to get out of the car. I just want you to get a feel for going out this way, you'll have to do it before long. As usual with Sue, the discussion was over before I had a chance to talk, and with my heart pounding I was soon following Sue out to the garage, thankful that Mary had insisted on a house that stood away from the rest of the world. 2 acres of trees separated me from my nearest neighbor and any chance of imminent discovery. It didn't do anything though to calm the fears that escalated as Sue drove away from the house and into traffic. As we drove towards town, I tried not to look out the window at the people who smiled at us while we waited at traffic lights. Did I say people? Make that men. Nearly every man between the age of 12 and 80 checked us out whenever the chance arose. There was once a time in my life when I did the same thing, so I knew what they were thinking. They'd momentarily look at our faces, then our chests, and if they were close enough they'd look down to see if we were wearing skirts and check out our legs. If they couldn't see our legs, they'd be content to stare at our chests until we drove on. They had to be wondering if we were wearing some type of sexy lingerie under our outfits, possibly a lacy bra, high-cut panties, or a garter belt and nylons. I knew what they were thinking. I thought the same things when before Mary died and my mood changed. After that I didn't even care about what a woman had on. I had no fantasies about her at all. Now my problem was that everything these men were fantasizing about my wearing I had on. I was wearing the lacy bra, the sexy high-cut panties, even the garter belt and nylons. I was the woman of their horniest fantasies. I was lost in thought when suddenly Sue reached over and pulled my skirt up several inches, exposing more leg than I cared to show. "What are you doing?" I frantically clawed at the hem of my skirt to pull it down, only to have Sue slap my hand away. "If you got it, flaunt it." Sue laughed as she held my hand. "Now I can't drive and worry about your being a prude. Either you leave your skirt where I put it and enjoy the attention, or I pull over and you can walk the rest of the way." I knew she wasn't kidding about walking. It was a favorite trick of hers when we were younger to make me walk home when I made her mad. I nodded silently in agreement and left my skirt where she had placed it. We got to my favorite fast food outlet, and just as promised, Sue went straight to the drive-thru where she ordered a salad for each of us. "Don't eat too much, Jackie," she chuckled. "You have to watch that figure of yours now. In case you're interested, you're a perfect size 9, the same as me, a great size for finding really great outfits. If I were you, I'd try really hard to stay that size." What did she expect me to say to that? "Thanks for the great advice, sis. I'll keep to a strict diet and start exercising." I just gave her a smile to shut her up, as I'd done in the past, and it seemed to have worked. It seemed to have worked for about 5 minutes, that is. The next thing I knew, we were pulling into the parking lot of a supermarket and Sue was turning off the ignition. "You're pretty low on a few things back at the house. No point in having to come back later, right?" she asked with an evil grin. I had completely forgotten that Sue hated being ignored, and my refusal to thank her for the compliment about my size had struck a nerve, and now it was time for revenge. Please, Sue, I can't go in there. I begged and pleaded for sympathy, but her eyes had that cold look I had always hated. I'm really happy that you think I'm a perfect size 9, really I am. Too late, Jackie, she said coldly. But I'll still go easy on you and not make you talk. Other than that, there's no chance of your being read. Read? Found out, discovered, whatever you want to call it, she said as she opened the door to leave. Now either you're coming with me or your wig is, your choice. Some choice, I muttered under my breath as I slowly opened my door. I was shaking like a leaf as I walked with Sue to the store. The clicking of my heels seemed to broadcast my coming, and I was sure that everyone would turn towards the unbelievably loud noise and the woman making it. Then it would happen, a grin would come over someone's face, and then it would turn into a laugh and they'd shout, "Check out that guy wearing a dress." We passed several people entering and leaving as we walked. Some smiled, others passed by without a glance. Only one man passed us, and the look on his face made me feel sure that he wasn't going to be the one to expose me. No, the look on his face said that there was nothing he'd like more than to see me exposed. Sue noticed the man's stare and her face lit up. "Smile at him," she whispered. "He likes what he sees." Smile to say thanks for the compliment. I wasn't stupid enough to ignore Sue twice in such a short time. Heaven knows what she would have done if I had, so I looked right at the man and smiled as women had done to me when they caught me checking them out. It's impossible to describe the relief I felt when he returned my smile, nodded, and kept walking. "See, that wasn't so bad, was it?" Sue teased. "He paid you quite a compliment, and all you had to do in return was smile at him." I was terrified, and you knew it. I whispered back. "You're having a good old time setting me up like this, aren't you?" "Yes, I guess I am," Sue replied indifferently. "But at the same time you're learning some important lessons. You really can pass as a woman, and you're learning how to react to men." "I'm not ready for these kind of lessons yet, and you know it," I argued. "You're pushing me too far, too fast." "Were you ready for that dress?" she teased. "That lingerie?" "You know what I mean," I pleaded. "It's too much." "If you were wearing a flimsy negligee and getting into bed with a guy, I might say it's too much, right now that is." Until then. By the time I recovered enough to respond, we were already walking into the store, and I didn't dare open my mouth for fear that my voice would give me away. Sue was amazing in her planning skills. She had drawn the argument out, then made an outrageous statement at a time when I couldn't possibly respond to it. I followed her into the store madder than ever, hoping to get revenge yet worried about what would happen if I tried. I quietly followed Sue around the market, trying to avoid looking directly at anyone. Sue was taking her sweet old time picking out a half-dozen items, obviously trying to make me feel as uncomfortable as possible, and it was working perfectly. I couldn't wait to get back to the car, pull my skirt up past my knees, and generously thank Sue for her compliments on my size and looks. I let out a huge sigh of relief once I closed the car door behind me, which caused my dear sister to break into a fit of laughter. "That guy thought you were cute," she said during a short break from hysterical laughter. "How's it feel to have men lust over you, Jackie? Did you enjoy it?" "It felt weird and very scary," I admitted. "I don't think I care for the way men have been looking at me. It's not right." "Jackie," Sue said in a suddenly serious tone, "I was really surprised at how pretty you looked after I finished with your makeup and everything. I wasn't sure how you were going to turn out, but when I saw what a doll you were, I knew I just had to get you out of that house. You needed to see yourself as others are seeing you, a very attractive, nicely built woman. You're going to have to get used to men looking at you. Believe me, they're not going to stop. If you just relax and let me work with you, I promise you'll enjoy it." "Work with me? What more do you have to do? You said I looked very attractive already," I asked, wondering what she had in mind. She had promised to turn me into a woman, but never said how she was going to do it. Maybe now she'd open up. Sue must have felt guilty about our little side trip to the market. She smiled to show she was doing it on her own, and then told me she'd explain it all when Craig got home. Back at the house, I sat down as gracefully as possible and removed my heels. "God, it feels great to get these off," I groaned. "How and why do women wear these things?" "We get used to them, you'll see." And we wear them because they make us look pretty and sexy and men love them. She explained patiently. Once you get used to them, you'll understand and enjoy the way they make your legs look and get looked at. I padded around in stocking feet preparing dinner and listening to Sue predict that soon I'd be buying myself pretty shoes to go with every outfit I own and that they'd be even higher heels than I wore today. How could I argue with her? She knew her plans for me far better than I did. All I could do was go along until I could get back on my feet and go back to being a man again. Whether Craig would follow was a question I couldn't answer though. Just before Craig got home, Sue insisted that I change into another dress that she had selected for me. Laying out on my bed was a low-cut short black dress and lingerie that made what I was wearing seem positively tame. I examined the half-cup black lace bra and wispy black lace panties for a few moments, then asked Sue to unzip the dress I had on. I carefully stepped out of the dress and my slip, then unhooked the nylons from my garters and set them aside. I was about to ask Sue to leave the room when I realized that I might need her help, so beaten again, I continued changing while Sue carried on a conversation about how cute I looked and what a nice figure I had. I of course thanked her for each and every compliment, fearful of ending up outside in only my panties and bra. I slipped out of my panties and into the sheer lace black ones, then fastened the garter belt and carefully rolled on a pair of nylons that felt as light as air itself. I did what I could with the bra, but Sue ended up showing me again the best way to put on a bra without help, something I thought best to remember since I didn't really think I'd want anyone else around while I put these things on. I stepped into the delicate half slip that matched everything else I wore and adjusted it so that the slit would be on the same side as the one I noticed in the dress I was going to wear. Sue was thrilled that I had taken that little step, but it was really something I had picked up from watching Mary dress. I decided not to mention how I knew to do that, preferring instead to reap the compliments Sue was lavishing on me. Once I had all of my new lingerie on and properly adjusted, I took a deep breath, was about to lower the dress over my head when Sue stopped me. "Hold it just a second, Jackie," she called out, racing for her room. "You need something else to go with that dress." Sue came flying back a few short seconds, waving something black that I couldn't quite make out. "Here you go," she cried triumphantly. "Just what that dress cries out for. A woman to wear it?" I joked, hoping she'd let it pass without problems. "A woman is going to wear it," she snapped as she handed me the garment. "My sister Jackie, as a matter of fact. Now put this around your waist and I'll hook you up." Puzzled, I put what looked like a girdle without legs with hook closures along the side around my waist and drew my breath in sharply as Sue pulled the sides together and fastened them. "What is this?" I gasped, barely able to take a breath. "It's too tight, I can't breathe." "Don't be such a baby," Sue laughed. "This is a waist cincher, it'll give you the shape you need for that dress. Just calm down, in a few minutes you'll get used to the tightness and adjust your breathing." "In a few minutes I'll be dead," I gasped as she helped me lower the dress over my head and zipped it up. I had to slip on a pair of black 3-inch heels which Sue insisted went with the dress before she helped me over to the mirror to redo my makeup. She smoothed cream all over my face, then deftly removed every trace of the makeup I wore earlier and quickly added what she called evening makeup to my face. This time the woman in the mirror wasn't just pretty, she was absolutely sexy and alluring. I could feel a familiar but embarrassing stirring in my groin as I stared at a woman that seemed so very desirable. How could I want that woman so badly and yet be her? "Hot, isn't she?" Sue giggled, guessing what I was thinking. "And that's just her face, it gets better. Want to see?" Between being stunned and the cincher, I just couldn't speak, so I nodded my head slowly and Sue helped me to my feet and to a full-length mirror where one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen stared out at me. She had everything a man could want in a woman: beautiful curly red hair, a dress that fit like a glove, showed her ample curves, allowed her breasts to peek out daringly from their confines, and showed shapely legs encased in black nylons and sexy heels. "That's you in there, Jackie," Sue taunted. "That beautiful, sexy woman in the mirror is my little sister Jacqueline. She's gorgeous, don't you think?" "Gorgeous," I whispered. "But me?" "All you, Jackie dear," Sue whispered back. "This is what you're going to look like when you move in with me. Men will fall all over themselves just to get a smile from those beautiful red lips of yours. You're a woman now, Jackie, a beautiful, sexy, desirable woman. She was right, I looked every bit as good as she said and more. A major shock to my already badly bruised male ego, this was going to take a lot of getting used to. I had barely enough time to get used to balancing on the higher heels before Craig walked in the door from school. He looked at me, smiled and said hi, then looked over at Sue. "Hi Aunt Sue," he called cheerfully. "Where's my dad?" Sue acted as if nothing was unusual. "Your dad's gone, Craig," she said very calmly and deliberately. Gesturing towards me, she smiled. "I'd like you to meet my sister Jacqueline, just call her Mom though." "Mom?" Craig asked, seeming thoroughly confused. Suddenly he turned his attention back to me. "Dad?" "Mom," Sue corrected. "This lovely lady is your mother." "Mom?" Craig asked as he looked me over from head to toe. "Is that really you?" "Yes, it's really me, Craig," I smiled. "So quit staring at my breasts like that, will you?" Craig immediately returned his gaze to my face. "You're beautiful, Dad. I can't get over how good you look." This time I didn't wait for Sue to step in. "Thank you, Craig. That's very nice of you, but please remember to call me Mom, okay?" Okay, Mom," he agreed with a laugh. "But you're still hot." "Thanks," I said as I slowly walked over to him and took him by the arm. "Now it's time to change you into my daughter Lori. Are you ready?" "I can't wait," he shouted excitedly. "I just want to look as good as you do, okay?" "Trust me, Lori," Sue laughed. "You're going to be just as pretty as your mother here. Your days as a boy are about to come to an end." Odd that the same words that terrified me seemed to delight Craig. He couldn't have been more pleased by the idea of being turned into a teenage girl. When Sue mentioned that she had an outfit prepared that she expected him to wear, he never protested once. Instead, he practically ran to his room to see what he was going to wear. I thought he was going to start doing flips and handstands when he saw the outfit Sue had chosen for him. On his bed lay a set of matching lingerie, very pretty but yet appropriate to a girl his age, a pair of white satin panties with lace around the waist and leg openings, white satin bra with a tiny pink rose where the cups joined, and a white half-slip with about 2 inches of lace at the bottom. Even I had to admit that Sue had excellent taste. The lingerie was definitely chosen to make Craig look and feel dainty and feminine without any overt sexiness. Just perfect for Craig's budding womanhood. What really caught his attention though was the pink dress hanging from his closet door. The dress would have set any young girl's heart to pounding, and it was obvious from his blank stare that it was having the same effect on Craig. The dress was pink lace over some type of pink satin type material with a neckline that was cut high enough to be modest yet low enough to tantalize any boy who might glimpse at the girl in it. Craig turned and threw his arms around Sue. "Aunt Sue, this is so wonderful. You don't know how much this means to me." "I'm happy to help you, Lori," Sue told him. "I just want to see you and your mom smiling and happy again." "I don't know about Dad, Mom, but I couldn't be happier." Craig said, his eyes beginning to glisten with tears. "I'd be happy if I could just breathe and get out of these heels," I laughed, trying to seem happy. "But in any case, it's your turn now, Lori, so let's get changed and have dinner." Actually, I didn't care about whether I had dinner or not, for some odd reason, though I couldn't seem to wait to watch my son being transformed into a pretty girl. "Aren't you two going to leave?" Craig asked as Sue and I made ourselves comfortable. I have to get changed and everything." "So what?" Sue shrugged. "We're all girls here. If you can't get used to changing in front of your mother and aunt, how will you ever get used to changing in front of Amy this summer?" "Amy knows about this," Craig asked as he undid his shirt. "What does she think of the whole idea?" "She was very concerned about the two of you," Sue said as we watched Craig remove his shirt and start on his slacks. "She hopes that this will help, and she loves the idea of having a girl cousin to talk to and hang out with." Craig hesitated for a bit when it came to removing his pants with me and Sue there, but he finally got the idea that we weren't leaving and slid them down to reveal his pretty white panties. He stood there waiting again until Sue cleared her throat, then stepped out of the panties he wore and pulled on the new ones. He sat down on the bed and with an expert skill level rolled up one leg of the pantyhose at a time and carefully pulled them over his hips and straightened the waistband. As he reached for the bra, Sue jumped up and stopped him, as I was hoping she would. With a flourish she produced a smaller set of fake breasts and a tube of glue. "May I?" I asked, taking the breasts and glue from her. Now I'd see just how much fun Craig thought this was going to be. Just wait until I glued these breasts onto his chest. He'd realize that to Sue this wasn't just a game. I smiled inwardly as I stared into eyes and applied a generous amount of glue before placing the breasts against his chest and holding them firmly in place. "Here, let me show you how to put one of these on," I laughed as he picked up the bra he was to wear. I took a lot of pleasure in showing him how to fasten it in front of him, turn it around and set his breasts into it just the way Sue had shown me. I was sure he'd feel as silly and humiliated as I had, but instead he was smiling happily. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly. "I never thought I'd ever be able to dress up with you at home. This is so great." I suppose that I had been hoping that Sue was wrong about Craig and that he'd balk at taking what might have been a little game as far as this. Instead of balking, though, Craig was happier than he'd been without his mother here. He was having so much fun that I knew I had been wrong. I watched as Craig adjusted his bra straps and stepped into the slip. I could almost hear a sigh of pleasure as he unzipped the dress and slowly slid it over his head. As he reached behind to get the zipper, I stepped forward again. "Let me help, Lori," I smiled as I pulled the zipper up to where he could reach it and finish zipping himself up. "You're such a beautiful young lady." I choked back the emotion that was showing in my voice as I felt tears building up in my own eyes. "I'm going to be so proud to have such a lovely girl as my daughter. I think you're both very sweet, but could you have your mother-daughter bonding session after I do her makeup? Leave it to my sister to ruin what had all the makings of a great Kodak moment." Craig stepped gingerly into the low-heeled shoes and followed Sue to my room for his makeover. She reached into a bag she had and brought out a lighter shade of liquid makeup which she blended all over Craig's baby face, then brushed on the setting powder and blush. She gently curled his lashes and applied a light pink shade of eyeshadow to his lids before doing his lashes again with a coat of mascara. I drifted back to earlier when I had been the one sitting in that chair having my face painted and my lashes curled. Craig looked so angelic sitting there. He seemed to be getting prettier by the moment. What had I been so afraid of when I had been sitting there? What was I so afraid of now? His makeup complete, Sue finished Craig off by clipping a fall into his long hair. He really looked cute with long blonde hair, I thought to myself. I think I'll insist that he keep it that way. When Sue was done, there was no trace of Craig left to be found. He had been completely replaced by a lovely young lady named Lori, my beautiful daughter Lori. He was thrilled with the change as much as Sue and I were. Now it was just a matter of changing the actions and thoughts to person. Sue had worked hard on me today, and I knew she wouldn't let up until she was sure that I would act like a woman at all times. Somehow seeing Craig all dressed up and looking so happy and pretty, it didn't seem quite so scary. All I had to do was to survive, I told myself, and this is what would help me survive. Later, when I was back on my feet and a man again, I'd look back at this time in my life and laugh about it. Over dinner, Craig and I listened intently as Sue described what her plans were for changing me into a secretary and Craig into a cute little beach babe. Sue would be here for the next 2 weeks, during which time I would be expected to dress and act as a woman all day, every day. Occasionally Sue and I would go out, but she promised not to purposely try to embarrass me. If I behaved, which of course she would be the judge of, I would have to wear dresses or skirts for that time and would also be expected to learn how to dress and do my own makeup and hair, which was a little long, and I would not be allowed to get cut. Craig would become Lori as soon as he got home from school and all weekend long. He too would be expected to wear dresses and skirts to get accustomed to them and would of course have to learn about fashion, makeup, and hairstyling. Sue said that she would occasionally take him out also to get him used to being in public, and the three of us would have little outings to movies or dinner, which would be both a treat and a lesson in acting feminine. Sue mentioned that she had ordered a few things to help Craig and I in our transformation and that she expected us to use them faithfully. We would notice a few changes, but they would all be reversible, Sue assured us, reversible if we so desired. After the 2 weeks were up, Sue would have to go back to work, and for a month we'd be on our own. John was going to take a vacation and spend the last 2 weeks before we moved helping us to polish our feminine images. Once we moved to California, we would be women, Sue assured us, smart, beautiful, and desirable women. She laughed and said that she wouldn't be at all surprised if we decided we wanted to stay that way forever. Exactly what type of changes will we notice, Sue? I hated to interrupt her little fantasy of having a sister and niece forever, but I did have a few questions. Nothing much, and like I said, it will all be reversible, if you want. I knew a brush off when I heard one, and although a part of me was afraid to push the subject, I still had to know. Come on, Sue, I prodded. What changes? You know it's too late for us to back out now, so spill what you know. All right, but remember it's all revere. I know, reversible, if we want. What I don't know is what they will be. I was either very brave or very foolish, but I wouldn't stop insisting until she broke. Physical, Sue said with a sheepish grin. You two will start going through puberty again. This time though, when it ends, you'll have female sex characteristics. You know, wider hips, prominent butts, breasts, the usual. Anything else we should know? I was on a roll now. It was the first time I could remember having her on the ropes. You'll be using a special gargle that will change your voices, and the hormones may have some effect on your feelings. Hormones? I was stunned. I never expected anything like that, although I probably should have. How else could we fit in so well as women unless we took something to change us into women? All very safe, reversible, reliable, and very fast-acting. Sue continued as if she were simply reading a cookbook. A few weeks from now you'll notice some breast growth, then some time later you'll be able to put your fake boobs in a drawer and your own in a bra. In between, your butts will fill out nicely and fat deposits will accumulate under your skin, making you look softer, rounder, and much more like women. I'm going to have real breasts? Craig exclaimed giddily. Will I really be able to wear a bikini like Amy? You'll probably end up as a 32B, Sue explained. I don't see any reason why you couldn't wear one if you want to. Hear that, Dad? Mom, I'm going to be wearing a bikini. And driving the boys wild, I added that just to watch Craig's reaction. It didn't seem to bother him at all that he'd be a magnet for boys. In fact, a bit of a smile seemed to come to his face. My son, in a bikini, surrounded by boys and loving it. What about me? I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but it was probably best to know what was happening to me. You'll probably end up with 34C bust line, Sue explained. You're a little older and heavier, which will make a difference. Sue filled us in on everything without any further prompting, telling us that we could expect to notice a difference in how we reacted to things. We'd be more subject to our emotions as were most women, and thanks to some special course we would take, we'd also begin to think of ourselves as being female. Craig would start to think and act just like any other girl his age, and I'd feel just like a woman my age, maternal instincts included. I would start on a more intensive training course that night, listening to cassette tapes of relaxing music as I slept. Hidden in the tapes were messages that would slowly alter my thinking, making me feel more and more like a woman. Because of my depression, the tapes would affect me immediately, Sue explained. My confused mind would latch onto the suggestions and hold tight to them. In a matter of days, I would find myself enjoying wearing pretty clothes and makeup. Later, my actions would be the feminine gestures and actions that I was learning, and just to ice the cake, I'd really begin to think of myself as Craig's mother. Craig would have a subtler course since he'd still have to retain his masculine gestures and actions until the end of school. He'd still be learning to think of himself as a girl and my daughter, with all the appropriate thoughts and gestures being fed into his mind. When school was over, he'd listen to a very special tape that would contain the keywords needed to flip the switch in his reprogrammed mind from boy to girl. We'd both stay that way until we decided we wanted to change back, then everything would be reversed. I'd end up as a man again, and Craig would, well, that of course remained to be seen. After dinner, the three of us cleaned up, then went to the other room to wait for Sue to begin our promised training for the evening. She walked into the room after us, carrying 3 glasses and a bottle of wine she picked up while we were shopping. Pouring 3 glasses, she handed Craig and I each a small bottle labeled Feminizes. Mine said level 3 while Craig's was level 2. The directions on the bottle were to take 1 pill twice daily to develop female physical characteristics, then 1 pill a day after the desired level of development to maintain them. Sue played the part of the gracious hostess, handing a glass of wine to me, then one to Craig. Dual purpose, she laughed, holding the bottle up. A toast to your new lives and something to wash down the pills with. Craig and I stared at the pills in our hands, then seemingly with a single thought popped them into our mouths and took a sip of wine. That didn't hurt, did it now, ladies? Sue laughed. You're on your way to becoming women now. Sue was nothing with sweetness and loved the entire rest of the evening, unless we made a mistake in how we walked, sat, or did any of the 50 or so other things she asked of us in the wrong way. Then it was back to being a drill instructor again, barking orders and waiting for instant obedience, which I might add she got. Even with the constant threat of being screamed at, I found it sort of fun to watch Craig as he learned the hard way that becoming a girl wasn't going to be easy. Craig did pretty well for himself though. I guess he was more interested in being a girl than I was, and soon he was walking with a gentle sway to his hips and flipping back his hair with a shake of his pretty head. He adapted easily to wearing heels after having practiced with his moms and seemed to have no problem in sitting properly. I wondered how he'd do when Sue took him out in public though. It was one thing to prance around the house pretending to be comfortable in women's clothes, but outside where people would be looking at you and judging you was a totally different experience. I hoped Sue would go easy on him and wait until he was ready. By the end of the evening, Sue was even congratulating me on how much better I was doing, and it actually made me happy. I don't know if it had been that I was feeling so bad for so long, but her compliments seemed to mean something to me. In a strange way, it gave me a goal. I decided to work as hard as I could to make Sue proud of me. I'd be a great sister to her and a wonderful mother to Craig. At the end of the evening, Craig and I both bathed and slipped on our nightgowns, this time though I did it without the hesitation I had the night before. Sue was showing me a way out of my depression, and the nightgown was part of it, as were the matching panties. I slid them on, put the tape into my player, turned it on, and fell asleep listening to the beautiful music. Tomorrow would be another day, I thought as I drifted off. What would it bring? The next morning I woke feeling a little better than I remembered feeling before. I couldn't remember a single thing from the tape Sue insisted I listen to except that the music was great. I was always a big instrumental fan, and the music on that tape was certainly among the best renditions of some of my favorite songs that I'd ever heard. I'd have to thank Sue for the tape at breakfast, but thought that I should also mention that they didn't seem to achieve their real purpose. I hated to disappoint her, but it was something that she should know, I thought as I carefully brushed my teeth. Staring into the mirror, I thought that I looked just a little pale and washed out. I felt much better though after I went back into my room, put on my wig and brushed it out, then brushed on a little blush and added some lipstick. I considered going down to breakfast in my nightgown, but since I had plenty of time before I had to start breakfast, I decided to change into something nice from my closet. I chose a nice sleeveless blue dress with a white skirt and short blue jacket to wear, dressy in a conservative way I thought, not at all like the black dress I had worn the night before. I hoped Sue would approve of it and give me a compliment to start my day out right. I had left my breasts glued on and found it almost erotic to place a lace-covered bra against my chest and carefully pull it over my breasts. I had watched Mary do the same things in the past and had been so overcome that on several occasions I had stopped her before she had them completely in the cup so that I could pull her down and make love to her. Would she find it funny if she were here to watch me put on a bra? Would she try to attack me as I had her? Setting aside my erotic daydreams, I slipped on a garter belt and carefully rolled up a pair of tan nylons and fastened them before slipping on a white full slip. I slid the dress gently over my head and carefully inspected myself in the mirror just as Sue had taught me to do. I didn't want to be embarrassed by having my slip show beneath the hem of my dress. I slid on the jacket and fastened the single claps before stepping into a pair of blue shoes with a medium heel. They were higher than the first pair I had worn yesterday, but I felt that a lower pair just wouldn't look right with my outfit, and I did want to start wearing high heels soon. With everything just right, I set off to make breakfast for my sister and daughter. It wasn't until I was halfway done with breakfast that it hit me. I had wanted to wear something pretty, and it had been my idea to put on makeup. Those tapes really did work. For a second I considered going back up and changing into something a little less pretty and maybe even taking off the makeup, but then it didn't seem like such a big deal to me, so I continued on with breakfast. No reason to change out of such a pretty outfit. It was comfortable and it looked good on me. Sue was also dressed when she came down, except that she had on a pair of jeans and a comfy-looking top. "You're looking very nice this morning, Jackie," she greeted me with a big smile after looking over my outfit. "Sleep well last night?" "Very well, thanks. I said as I stepped back to let her get a better view of my outfit. Thanks for the tape, I really enjoyed it. I noticed, she said with a knowing smile. Any problems? I never even realized what happened until I was almost done here, I told her as I started to set out the plates. I'm amazed at how well the tape worked. I have a few others for you, Sue told me, obviously thrilled with my acceptance of the tape. There's a whole series I'd like to have you listen to. They'll smooth out any rough spots and make a perfect lady out of you. I thought about objecting. I still wasn't positive I wanted to be a perfect lady, but instead I smiled and told her how much I was looking forward to using them. Geez, one night with the tape and I was becoming putty in her hands. After the whole set I just might find myself wearing some flimsy nightgown and going to bed with a guy. I'd have to check with Sue about that possibility, but not right now. Craig came into the kitchen a few minutes later, leaned over and kissed Sue on the cheek, then me. Morning, Aunt Sue. Morning, Mom. Beautiful day, isn't it? It certainly is, I exclaimed once I recovered from the shock of having my son kiss me. Why the kiss though? Just wanted to show you that I love you, he said with a shrug of the shoulders. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, Lori dear, Sue told him. Doesn't your mom look nice? She picked out her own outfit today. Very nice, Mom, Craig said as he gingerly nibbled on the dry toast I made him. Not as hot as you looked last night though. I can't look hot all of the time, sweetheart, I said with a wistful smile. But thanks for noticing. I stared and smiled at Craig as he finished his toast and small glass of juice. He normally had a plate of eggs and several sausages which he washed down with a large glass of chocolate milk. Today I had given him a slice of dry toast and a small cup of juice, and he was not only happy with it, he said he was filled. Apparently he was being influenced by the tape he had listened to. Aunt Sue, in case I forgot during the excitement last night, I wanted to thank you for that gorgeous dress and all the help you gave me last night. You're the sweetest aunt in the whole world. With that he gave each of us another kiss, washed down his hormone pill with the last of his juice, gathered his books and was off to school. Notice any change? Sue asked. Or was that the same old Craig? Oh, Craig was there, I said with a laugh, but Lori was peeking out and waving to us. Wasn't that kiss so precious? I nearly fell off my chair. Craig hadn't given me a goodnight kiss since he was 8 years old, saying that big boys don't kiss their dads. Now he's giving me a kiss at breakfast and calling me Mom. That must have been one powerful tape he listened to, I thought. I did sort of like it though. As we cleaned up the dish, Sue and I talked about fashion, what to wear when, how to mix and match outfits to extend my wardrobe, and how I should dress for the office. It was so much information that finally I had to tell her that I wasn't sure that I could remember it all. She just smiled, patted my hand and said that by the time I was ready to start working it would all be second nature to me. Sue put me through a refresher course in mannerisms which I passed with flying colors. Next came a practical lesson in female clothing in which we went through my closet and drawers so that I could learn what each item was called, along with how and when it was worn. I learned how to unzip dresses just far enough to get them over my head while still being able to reach the zipper to pull it closed. That was an important lesson for me. Until then I wasn't sure how I'd dress if I had to do it alone. Sue spent a great deal of time on my lingerie. Backless dresses required special bras that wouldn't show, strapless dresses required strapless bras, and if I didn't want to wear my fake breasts I'd need to wear padded bras. I learned about high-cut panties, thong panties, briefs, and bikini panties, as well as full slips, half slips, slips for evening gowns, petipants, and dresses that didn't need slips. We took a quick break for lunch, at home this time, then back to learning about makeup, nail polish, and hair styling. Learning about makeup turned out to be very fascinating. I couldn't believe the hundreds of shades of what I thought were just a few basic colors. Men I soon found thought a particular color was known as red, but women knew it as cherry red, burgundy, pink, frosted pink, deep red, passionate red, and numerous other variations. It amazed me that there were so many variations, but Sue patiently explained that they were necessary for a woman to coordinate her makeup with her outfit. It would be a terrible fashion mistake for a woman to be wearing a red dress with pink lipstick. After hours of makeup lessons, we moved to hairstyling and learning how to use curlers. It was of extreme importance, Sue stressed, to get a trained beautician I trusted to fix my hair in a flattering style. I could then keep that style or have it changed, but I should never change it myself. That was a job for someone who knew what they were doing. All I should do is to try to maintain the style with curlers and brushes. After a long afternoon of training, we broke for dinner, then started on Craig. An hour after walking through the door, Craig was gone, replaced by a pretty girl in a short tight skirt and heels. Sue let him do his own makeup just as I had earlier, and even she had to admit that he seemed to have a natural eye for colors and which ones looked best on him. He did his eyes in a smoky brown to match his skirt and wore a shade of coral lipstick that seemed to just darken his natural lips color instead of looking as though he had lipstick on. He selected a shade of light rose blush over his foundation and powder, which gave his cheeks a healthy glow. When he finished with a light brown mascara and added the hairpieces, I was sure that no boy in the world would be able to resist his face or his legs. After dinner, it was the same training in clothes, hair and makeup for Craig that I had gone through. He had a little trouble with the clothes that I did. My years of observing Mary had helped, but breezed through the makeup part. His toughest challenge was maintaining his modesty while trying to do everyday tasks in the mini skirt he was wearing. I didn't realize how tough it was for the girls when they wore these short skirts, he mused as he held the skirt close and sat down on the sofa. They sure look good in them though. Which is why they wear them, Sue told us. What do you think of them, Lori? I like them, Craig giggled. They're a lot of trouble, but they make my legs look so nice. Good girl. Sue clapped happily. You're learning fast. Being a pretty girl is a lot of hard work, but it's worth it, right? Oh, absolutely, Aunt Sue, Craig gushed as he worked on crossing his legs without showing off his panties. Don't you think so, Mom? Yes, I suppose you're right, Lori, but I'm a little old for mini skirts. I felt a twinge of regret come over me. My legs are every bit as nice as hers, I thought to myself. Maybe I should pick up a short skirt or two for myself. At the end of the evening, we were all worn out from the hours of constant practicing, so after a few goodnight kisses we parted to ready ourselves for bed. I was looking for a nightgown to wear when suddenly I was overcome with the urge to wear a very short, very sheer gown with a matching jacket and panties with rows of ruffled lace on the seat. The gown had short sheer sleeves, a satin underskirt, I learned the term from my wardrobe lessons, for modesty, and a sheer lace bodice, another term from my lessons. It was something a woman would wear for her honeymoon or a romantic getaway with her husband or lover, since it pretty well screamed out, "Take me." I looked around worried that someone might be watching me, then quickly pulled out the gown, robe, and panties and dashed into my bathroom to admire its breathtaking beauty as I waited for my bath to be ready. When all was ready, I slipped into the tub of warm, softly scented water and let the silky bath oil work on my skin as I relaxed, or at least tried to relax. The problem with relaxing was that I had hung the nightgown I wanted to wear on a hook that was directly in my line of sight from the tub. There was just no way to avoid seeing it as I laid back to enjoy my bath, and the more I looked at it, the more excited I became. I was getting all worked up imagining how sexy that nightgown would look on some lovely woman later that night, but I was going to be the woman in that nightgown. I was starting to turn myself on. I felt guilt about wearing the nightgown when I finished my bath, but something inside my head told me that I was going to love the silky sensation of the satin underskirt against my soft, smooth skin, and I just had to see if I looked as sexy as I had imagined I would. As I slid the panties on, I noticed how exquisitely smooth and silky they felt against my skin, and that I was getting even more excited wearing them than I was thinking about wearing them. I quickly slipped on the gown, hoping to hide the telltale signs of my growing excitement, but it wasn't of much help coming as it did to just past my panties. I used to beg Mary to wear clothes like this, but she refused, saying it made her feel silly. I felt sexy, naughty, and just a very little bit guilty, but silly was not something I was feeling at all. I set up my cassette player, then slipped between the sheets, enjoying the silkiness of my nightgown and panties against my body. Surely this is what heaven was meant to be like. The next morning I felt wonderful, happy, carefree, and anxious to show off how I looked in my nightgown. I slipped on the short robe with the pink sash and was just ready to start breakfast when I realized that something wasn't right. I thought and thought of what it could be. Makeup would be silly with a nightgown, so would a pair of heels or nylons. Something was missing, but what? Just when I thought I'd never think of what was missing, it hit me: perfume. A light spritz of perfume would really set this little ensemble off just perfectly. I found a scent on my vanity that I liked, so I sprayed just a small amount on my neck and went to make breakfast content that I was done up just right. When Sue entered the kitchen, I stopped what I was doing and turned with my arms outstretched so that she could get a good look at what I was wearing. "Jackie, that is such a sexy-looking outfit," she gushed. "You look positively delectable in it too." "Thanks," I blushed self-consciously, even though I really didn't want her to stop telling me how pretty and sexy I looked. I wanted to know that I was woman enough to wear satin, lace, and chiffon. I came across it in my drawer last night and I just had to wear it. It isn't too slutty looking, is it? A woman is allowed to look slutty now and then, Sue laughed. It reinforces your femininity to feel sexy and desirable. I'm so glad you said that, I sighed with relief. I was really worried last night that I might be going a little too far too fast. How do you feel now? Sue asked, concern evident in her voice. It was so nice to have my sister showing such concern for me. I blinked back a tear and collected my thoughts. I feel pretty, feminine, sexy, and so happy that I'm going to cry. Go ahead and have a good cry if you feel like it, Sue told me as she kissed me on the cheek. It's a woman's privilege as much as changing her mind. Sue's kiss seemed to cheer me up that suddenly I no longer felt the need to cry. I still had to get breakfast ready and I couldn't wait to see what Craig thought of his mom in a sexy little nightie. I thanked Sue for her concern, then kissed her back before returning to preparing breakfast. Minutes later I heard a low whistle as Craig caught sight of me. "Mom, you look so hot," he said as he stared. "Got a boyfriend stopping by later?" I playfully swatted him on the backside. "You know I'm not interested in having a boyfriend. I'm afraid that you'd steal them away. Your boyfriends would be just a bit too old for me, Mom," he joked. "I'm not in the market for a sugar daddy right now." "Oh really?" I asked in a mock-serious tone. "And just what are you interested in?" "Well, there's always Randy, the quarterback of the school's football team." Was I seeing things, or did Craig have that far-off look in his eyes of a girl in love? "That cute, huh?" I knew I was leading him on, but I was wondering how far he was really willing to take this idea of becoming a girl. "Oh Mom, he's the cutest boy in the whole school, maybe the whole world." My 16-year-old son had a major crush on the quarterback. I hoped he'd hold on long enough for us to get to California. It would be very hard to explain why he was staring all dreamy-eyed at another boy. After breakfast I sat down and had a long talk with Sue about Craig. As it happened, she was concerned about his attitude too, but explained that it was a combination of the tapes and the hormones. He was a slow developed and the female hormones and the pills must have had a stronger effect on him than Sue had counted on. He was having feelings of attraction to boys because of the hormones, and those feelings were reinforced by the tapes. I was going to have to sit down and have a little mother-daughter talk to him about boys in the hopes of getting his emotions settled down before they got him into trouble. I felt so much better after talking to Sue that while I was changing I decided to listen to another one of the tapes she had given me. I knew that they were designed to make me feel more like a woman, but that was okay. I'd been listening to them for 2 straight nights now without any problems. It wasn't as if I was working the streets hustling men or anything like that. I was going to have to start looking for a job as a woman soon, so it was a good thing for me to get used to all of the pretty outfits I would be wearing. I removed my nightie as slowly as I possibly could. Okay, I actually did a striptease routine that left me in a giggling fit. When I finally recovered, I decided that after the wonderful experience of wearing a sexy nightie, I should try something daring for the day also. I thought about a mini skirt like Craig had worn, but it just didn't seem right to me. I didn't want to look like some over-the-hill streetwalker. I just wanted to feel really pretty and sexy like I did when I wore that nightie or that black dress. I looked at the clothes in my closet, but there wasn't anything sexier than that black dress, and I didn't feel in the least bit interested in wearing that waist cincher again. It was sexy looking and it gave me some wonderful curves, but it had taken most of the evening before I had gotten used to wearing it. I was about to give up when I got the idea for the perfect outfit. A full-skirted red dress with a black patent leather belt would certainly catch people's eye, and if I selected just the right lingerie, I could project an image of a well-dressed secretary without anyone knowing that I was wearing my sultriest lingerie underneath. I quickly pulled out a pair of black lace bikini panties, a push-up bra with lace cups, a garter belt with black lace garters, a sexy-looking black full zip and a pair of the sheerest black nylons that I owned completed my lingerie. I carefully examined the way I looked in the mirror before donning my dress. My breasts were being pushed up and out by my bra, my panties were taut against my hips and just high enough to prevent any embarrassing show of my true sex. My garters were carefully threaded through my panties, and my lace-trimmed slip ended several inches above my sexy-looking knees. I was one hot-looking lady. I put on my wig and brushed it out all by myself, but I needed a little help from Sue with my makeup. "You look fantastic, Jackie," Sue told me as she thinned out my eyelashes. "This will give your eyes a little sexier look though. You have such pretty features, it's a shame you had to be a guy." "I guess you mean that as a compliment, so thank you." I certainly didn't want to aggravate her when she was next to my eye with a sharp object, and I was beginning to appreciate my new looks. When I thought about it, I couldn't believe that in a few short days Sue had cheered me up and given me something to live for. "You're starting to enjoy dressing this way, aren't you, Jackie?" Sue teased as she applied a coat of mascara to my lashes. "You like being a pretty woman, don't you?" I smiled up her. I probably didn't need to say a word, but I wanted to. "Yes," I answered blissfully. "I guess I am. I love wearing sexy lingerie under my clothes. It's just the way you said it would be, just an ordinary lady on the outside but sexy and oh so feminine underneath." "Are you afraid?" Sue asked softly as if reading my mind. "Does it bother you that you enjoy becoming a woman?" "Yes, it still bothers me a little bit," I confessed, happy to unload my feelings. "I guess I never thought of myself as much of a woman before. I never thought I could look like this." Sue assured me that faithful listening to the tapes would ease my guilt and allow me to enjoy living as a woman. Soon I'd be dressing in more casual clothes and living my life completely as a woman with little thought of being a male. I would, she promised, be happy and content living as a woman and a mother. I began picturing myself in a pretty outfit watching a football game where my pretty daughter Lori was one of the cheerleaders. She'd be stirring up the crowd in her short skirt and tight sweater, her long blonde hair tied back in a cute ponytail. The reason for her excitement would of course be her boyfriend, the quarterback. After the game, she and I would stop for a cup of hot chocolate and she'd tell me all about how wonderful, cute, and sexy her boyfriend was. I'd smile happily, enjoying the mother-daughter bonding. "Are you still there, Jackie?" Sue asked as she finished with my makeup. "Thinking about something special?" "Being a mother to Lori is going to be wonderful," I answered wistfully. "I just know I'm going to be a great mom for her." Sue let me go on and on about how wonderful I felt as Lori's mom as we straightened up the house. Then, reaching into her suitcase, she produced a large envelope and pulled out a sheaf of legal documents. Laying them on the table before me, she smiled and said, "Time to put your money where your mouth is, Jackie." I looked over the papers in front of me and felt my heart leap into my throat. Staring me in my pretty face were documents asking that corrections be made to my and Craig's birth certificates. The sex was to be changed to female and our names were to be changed from Steve and Craig to Jacqueline Marie and Lori Elizabeth. After that came a form to change my driver's license to show my new name and sex, and to have all of Craig's records changed to his new name and sex. Once everything was submitted and approved, Craig and I would be legally considered to be females by the state of California. "Come on, Jackie, you told me that you couldn't wait to be a woman and a mother. All you have to do is sign these, and from the moment you arrive in California you will be." Sue was pressuring me to give up my masculinity and become legally female along with Craig. I reached for the papers and the pen that she offered me. I wanted to be Jacqueline Marie and I knew Craig would want to be Lori Elizabeth. All I had to do was to fill out a few simple forms and our dreams were on their way to becoming reality. I smiled happily as I filled out the requests and signed them. All that was left would be Craig's signature when he got home. After I signed the papers, I smiled at Sue. "How about lunch?" I asked. "I've got cabin fever and need to get out." "You're willing to go out dressed like that?" She beamed. "Are you positive?" I fluffed my hair and pouted. "Don't you want to be seen with your little sister?" Sue threw me a small black clutch purse, grabbed her own, and we were off to lunch. Once again, I was going to be far away from the safety of my home while dressed entirely as a woman. This time though it was my choice and I couldn't wait. We pulled into the parking lot of a restaurant that catered to many of the local office people, which is why I had asked to go this one. I wanted to get a look at what the women office workers wore just to make sure that I fit in when I eventually became a working girl myself. Once again, by the clicking of my heels on the surface of the parking lot seemed to announce my arrival, but this time it sounded like a beautiful symphony to my ears. I was a woman, and this was the sound a woman made. It was wonderful. We ran into a man leaving just as we got to the door. He smiled and held the door for what he surely thought were two women out for lunch. I caught his eye briefly, smiled, and thanked him for his kindness. His smile widened noticeably as he nodded and said good afternoon to us. It was just as Sue had told me. As an attractive woman, I would have incredible power over men with just my smile. I had certainly brightened up that man's day just by giving him a smile. It cost me nothing but gave me an exhilarating sense of control. I followed Sue into the lobby with my head held just a little higher, my breasts jutting out just a little further, and a new sense of self-confidence. As we waited to be seated, I took a quick glance around and noticed that men sitting nearby were finding all sorts of reasons to look in our direction. One man must have decided that the wall next to us was suddenly the most interesting thing in the world, judging by his stare. Once in a while I would notice his eyes moving from the wall to the floor and our legs, but he always avoided my gaze by returning to his study of the wall. Another was clearly interested in us and made no attempt at all to hide his appreciation for our looks, smiling if I happened to catch his eye, which was busily undressing us. So that was what it felt like to all the women I had stared at. Did they realize I was undressing them with my eyes? Did they find as much enjoyment in it as I was finding? I often wondered what they were wearing under their dresses and suits. Did they get as much delight wearing erotic lingerie under an ordinary suit as I did? My world was changing rapidly, and it was all I could do to hang on for the ride. I had so many questions, experienced so many wonderful new feelings, and loved each and every minute of my new life. I paid careful attention to what the other women wore, how they acted, and everything about them. None of them seemed to notice my watching them. If they were interested in anything but their lunches, it never showed. It was an odd feeling, similar to being invisible. As long as they thought I was a woman, I could look as much as I pleased. Studying the other women really boosted my ego. I was dressed and acting just like any other woman. I fit in perfectly. I had a pretty light lunch since I had a private goal of fitting into that sexy black dress without a waist cincher. Then we were headed for home when Sue brought up the idea of having my nails done and ears pierced. It sounds like fun, but I'd almost certainly be discovered. The thought of having my ears pierced really excited me. It would be a big step to modify even that small a part of my body to make me more feminine, but someone that close would realize that I had on a wig. Even sitting there getting my nails done would put me under a magnifying glass that I wanted to avoid. "What if," she asked, dangling what she knew to be a juicy carrot before me, "I took you somewhere where it wouldn't matter? Would you consider having your hair styled too?" I'd let them do anything they wanted. I promised. Anything. If only such a place existed, it would be the answer to all of my prayers. All they do is hair, nails, and ear piercing, Sue laughed. Anything else is a personal problem for you. That would be just fine, thank you. Was she just teasing me, or did such a place exist? Good, because you have a 2:30 appointment, we'd better get going. An appointment? You set this all up without asking me if it was okay? I didn't know whether I should be mad or not. Once again, she was making important decisions without asking me. Of course, an opportunity like this was too good to be passed up. Did I ask your permission to take you shopping that first time? She flashed me her best stuff at smile. Today you practically begged me to take you out. Now do you want to look like those women in the restaurant or not? She knew the answer. I could see it in her face. I hope you know what you're doing. Sue drove to a small shop called Linda's where we were greeted by a woman a year or two older than me. She introduced herself as the owner, greeted me as Jackie, and led me back to her room and asked that I take off everything but my bra and panties, then put on a button-down shift. Once I was changed, Linda escorted me back out to the shop, shampooed my hair, then led me to a waiting chair where they already had a manicure tray set up with several other items I didn't recognize. After taking my wig, she began working on my hair. She seemed so easygoing and friendly that we were soon chatting away as if we were old friends. Your sister tells me that you want to go out without your wig as much as possible, she said as if there was nothing odd about what I was doing. Luckily your hair is just long enough and thick enough that it can be fixed into a pretty style that should be just what you want. It's a very popular style with my clients who want to do without a hot wig in the summer. I didn't realize that many women wore wigs, they all seem so natural looking. I guess she realized what I was really asking. Some do, but I was talking about my male clients. Even her laugh made me feel at ease. She wasn't laughing at me, just at a crude attempt to ask what was really on my mind. I'm sorry, I'm very new at this. I never realized before that many men did this sort of thing. Enough to make my family financially secure, to say the least. Her laugh and smile were contagious, and soon I was relaxed and listening to her stories of how she got into making men pretty. She had worked in a shop for years, just barely making a decent wage when she decided to strike out on her own. It was tough going, and she was about to give up when she got a call from a man asking if she'd mind making him up for a party. She had her doubts but needed the money, so she agreed and set an appointment. As she listened to what the man wanted done, she began to realize that he was asking for things to be changed that would not wear off in the near future. She finally told him that it would be easier for her if he told her what her really wanted, and he broke down and said he wanted to be able to pass as a woman for a job interview. She thought it a little odd, but a customer was a customer, and soon he was a very happy customer with golden blonde hair, perfect makeup, long, polished nails, and smooth legs. Several weeks later, a very well-dressed woman in a smart-looking business suit stopped in to thank her for helping her land the job and asking if she'd mind if he recommended her service to some of his friends who also wanted to look like women. She agreed and soon had a clientele pleased with both their looks and her discretion. Sue looked at me smugly, and "I told you so" grin all over her face. God, I hated it when she was right. My husband wasn't thrilled about it at first, but once we bought the new house we'd always wanted, he never complained again. Linda laughed as she combed and cut. By the way, Jackie, is there anything special you'd like to have done? The question caught me completely off guard. I was finally being given a choice in what was being done to me. What a shock. A tiny whisper in the recesses of my brain wanted me to tell Linda to stop, that I didn't want to wear women's clothes, didn't want my hair and nails done, didn't want to be a woman at all. Yes, I nearly shouted in glee. Can you dye my hair the same color as my wig? I think it would look so pretty. So much for the whispering in my brain. Now it was more of a faint whimper, growing fainter by the second. Hours later I was rolling my nylons up my silky smooth, newly waxed legs, being very careful not to snag them on either my long red fingernails or my pretty red toenails. Only after I was completely dressed did I chance a look at myself in the mirror. After I was all done, Linda had allowed me to look at myself in a mirror. I was thrilled with the pretty hairstyle she had created for me, short but undoubtedly feminine, very pretty and flattering, and a near-perfect match of the color I had hoped for. Looking at it now with my dress on, I could see that it was everything I wanted it to be, and I was practically in tears because of it. I could go shopping, have lunch, see a movie, do anything I wanted to do without worrying about my wig. If my new hairstyle wasn't enough, I could always stare at the pretty little gold balls in the center of my earlobes. Linda had worked very hard to make me over into a woman, and I couldn't begin to thank her. My legs were smooth and silky, my face was still tingling from the facial and makeover, gorgeous red nails extended beyond my fingertips, and I was the happiest woman alive. What do you think of yourself now, Jackie? Sue asked as I left the changing room. Are you satisfied that you'll pass? Pass? I was thinking of entering a beauty contest or two. I feigned indifference for maybe 30 seconds, then threw my arms around Sue and hugged her tight. Thank you, Sue, you've been so good to me. I was worried that you might get mad at me for this, Sue admitted. I couldn't stand to watch you sink any further. I had to do something drastic just to get your attention. This is all I could think of. I could never thank you enough for what you've done, Sue. I know it's a little odd, but I don't care. I'm really having a wonderful time as a woman. Between Linda's and home I must have thanked Sue a couple of dozen times, but I still didn't think it was enough. After all, she had picked me out of my depression and shown me that I could have a life if I wanted to, a life as a beautiful woman for as long as I wanted. Craig told me that I was a real knockout and hung on my every word as I talked about the events of that afternoon. Once again he was wearing a miniskirt, but this time it was as if he'd grown up in them. He sat perfectly with his legs together and his movements were the perfect emulation of a poised young woman who had the benefits of a finishing school. It wasn't hard to imagine him sunning himself on a beach in a cute little bikini, a good-looking guy rubbing suntan oil on his back, or at a formal dance in a pretty gown dancing with some handsome young man who was totally captivated by the lovely young woman in his arms. Craig's looks and actions would surely guarantee him plenty of male attention, and he seemed to know it. Sue worked us tirelessly until we could do anything she asked in a feminine manner without having to think about it. It had been a long, hard week, with me starting off as Steve and ending up as a beautiful woman named Jackie, and my 16-year-old son wasting no effort to become my daughter Lori. The long week had finally come to an end though, and it was finally Friday, the day Sue had promised to set aside to let her sister and niece celebrate. Craig burst through the door after school, and after a quick "Hi Mom" to me, he sought out Sue and asked if she was still serious about letting us celebrate. His question answered to his satisfaction, he hurried off to his room to change into something more appropriate for a young woman out for dinner with her mom and aunt. My dress was dark blue with a white pleated skirt, white trim on its short sleeves and lapels, and an insert for the bodice that appeared to be the lace top of a dark blue camisole. My lingerie was virgin white satin, the panties had a lace front panel, and the bra was another push-up style designed to produce breathtaking cleavage. I slipped into one of my favorite garter belts, rolled on a pair of white silky nylons, then stepped into a white half-slip with a 6-inch lace hem before I slid my dress over my head. The sensation of my skirt brushing against all of that nylon and satin was nothing short of being sinfully erotic, and I loved every second of it. I did my makeup and carefully brushed out my hair to keep the look I had gotten at the beauty shop. A pair of dark blue pumps with 3-inch heel completed my outfit and provided me with a sexy little sway to my butt, as well as drawing attention to my long legs. I examined myself carefully in a full-length mirror, then checked my makeup in a magnifying mirror, but frankly it was just a waste of time. I was simply beautiful. Sue was wearing a very nice green dress, low cut but below the knees. She was a good-looking woman and men had always found her attractive. I found myself wondering which of us they'd prefer now. When Craig was finally ready, I thought it a real shame that there weren't any trumpeters forming a lane for this most beautiful princess to walk down. He wore a black dress with a pink cast to it that shimmered as the light caught it. His lipstick was a subdued shade of pink that matched the pink in his dress perfectly, and his eyes were highlighted with white then overlaid in pink. All of his practice with his makeup had obviously paid off, as his face did not appear to have had a drop of foundation or a grain of powder on it. Even the light touch of pink blush on his cheeks looked perfectly natural and blended in so well with his nail color. Craig's dress had a very modest scoop neckline, which was offset by being just slightly longer than the baby doll nightgown I enjoyed wearing. His legs, so smooth and shapely, looked as though they were meant to be admired, and I had little doubt about they would be as soon as boys caught sight of him. He wore a pair of pink low-heeled pumps with a small black bow at the tongue which drew your eye to his trim ankles, then to his well-shaped legs and back to the hem of his dress. Craig had done his homework and learned his lessons well. He presented the perfect picture of a well-dressed young lady. The three of us exchanged compliments on our outfits, then, with Sue leading the way, slung our purses over our shoulders and walked out to the car, skirts swinging and heels clicking. Craig was a little hesitant about getting in, but after watching me slide right in, he held his short skirt close to him and slid in next to me. "You're sure this is safe, right Mom?" he asked nervously. "Everyone's really going to think I'm a girl, right?" "It's going to be fine, Lori," I said soothingly. "I felt the same way my first time, but if you just relax you'll have a ball. You're a pretty young lady out for dinner with her mom and aunt. Just act the part and nothing will go wrong." Craig closed his pretty eyes and took several deep breaths, which caused his bust to rise noticeably. He exhaled, smiled, and said he felt better knowing that his mom was there with him. I felt so warm and protective that I leaned across and kissed his head. "Don't worry, Lori, Mom's here with you," I told him as I held his hand. It seemed to make us both feel better. We were escorted to our seats by a pretty young woman about Craig's age with long blonde hair and a tight skirt that showed off her cute little butt and legs. What do you think of her? I whispered to Craig, who was staring at the young woman as she walked away from us. I'm wondering if I'd look that good in a tight skirt, he replied absent-mindedly. And she'd look better with shorter hair. The old Craig would have been more concerned with getting a date with a hot-looking girl like that, but now all he could seem to think of was how he'd look in her outfit. Hormones, special tapes, they were all having the desired effect on us. We no longer seemed to think of ourselves as males. Women held an interest only for purposes of comparing ourselves to them. Sexually there was nothing. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner and were the object of many a male's admiring glance. Craig found it hard to take at first, but Sue whispered something to him which made him smile, cross his legs, and sit up much straighter to the delight of several young men in the immediate area. Whatever Sue had done had just caused Craig to do a complete change to Lori. The few rough spots in his gestures were completely gone. He was smiling, laughing, and enjoying himself as a pretty girl. Halfway through the meal I had a familiar urge. "I've got a problem, Sue. I have to use the restroom," I whispered. "So do I, Mom. Come on, let's go." Craig volunteered in a cheerful voice. He grabbed his purse, stood up and looked at me. "Coming?" he asked. Sue smiled at me. "It's up to you, but we're not going home for a few hours." Pretty dresses, sexy lingerie, men smiling at me, all that I could handle. Using the women's restroom though was a terrifying step. If I was discovered, I'd probably be arrested and branded a pervert. Dinner was one thing, but the bathroom was another world altogether. "I can't wait, Mom. You can hold it if you want." With that he smiled, turned and began walking towards the restrooms. I thought about it for a second, then quickly grabbed my purse and hurried off to catch up with him. We waited in line for several minutes with other women, but we were more interested in each other's outfits than anything else. When my turn came, I casually walked into a stall, locked the door, did what I came to do, and resisted the urge to do a victory dance. I was a woman in a woman's world. Craig was waiting for me at the sinks touching up his makeup. I joined him and we smiled, sharing another special mother-daughter moment. I touched up my lipstick, brushed my hair, then carefully smoothed out the wrinkles in my skirt. I wanted to take my time and enjoy myself, but my dinner was getting cold and Craig wanted his dessert. I tucked away the memory of my first time in the ladies' room in a warm spot of my heart to be treasured always, then followed Craig back to our table. Sue gave me one of her smug looks, but it didn't matter. I crossed my legs, straightened up and smiled at a man at a nearby table. We had a great evening, and when it was all over, Craig and I carefully hung up our dresses, put away our lingerie, slipped into our nightgowns and fell asleep listening to the wonderful sounds from our tape decks. Sue had explained that once we listened to the first minute of the first tape we would be hooked and feel that we just had to listen to all of the tapes. It was so exciting to think that listening to those tapes was turning us into women and we couldn't stop it. When we woke up, the tape would have done its job implanting suggestions on our brains and pushing us further along the road to becoming women. The next day was Saturday and Craig was thrilled to be able to spend an entire weekend as a girl. He came to breakfast in a very pretty black and with dotted dress with a two-tiered skirt, tan stockings, and black skimmers. His makeup was just right for the shopping trip we had planned for the afternoon. He seemed completely at ease in his pretty outfit, and the gracefulness and gestures from the night before seemed to have carried over nicely. He did everything just the way any girl his age would. I was dressed in a pretty pink floral, ankle-length skirt that caught my eye when I went to find something to wear that morning. I looked over the many dresses and skirts in my closet without finding anything that appealed to me until I saw that skirt. It looked very pretty and seemed like it would be comfortable to wear, so I paired it with a pink nylon shell top and a pair of pink skimmers. I considered wearing my usual sexy lingerie, but I felt drawn to a pair of plain white nylon panties, a simple bra with lace-covered cups, a long half-slip and a pair of tan pantyhose. I felt odd pulling on the pantyhose. I preferred the sexiness of a garter belt and nylons, but my legs looked just as pretty and it felt nice to have my whole lower body encased in nylon. I slipped the straps of my bra onto my shoulders and was pleased to see that even with an everyday type bra on I still looked enticing. My slip gave me an added bonus, the sensuous feeling of nylon against nylon as I moved. It felt so phenomenal that I found myself wondering why I had never tried something like this before. Why hadn't Mary had ever mentioned the wonderful feelings produced by putting nylon and satin against the skin? If men knew how erotic it could be to wear lingerie, I doubt they'd ever buy another pair of cotton briefs again. How could anyone not enjoy feeling sexy and pretty? I looked great in the skirt, but the shell was just a little too sheer until I slipped on a pretty lace-trimmed camisole. What a fantastic garment. The lace pattern was visible under my top yet hid my bra effectively. I'd have to pick up a few more. A woman couldn't have too much petty lingerie. I slipped my top back on, brushed out my hair, then went to work on making my face match my outfit. That wasn't too tough. A light pink blush, coral lipstick, pink eyeshadow blended with white were very effective at drawing out the pink from my skirt and the white from my top. I carefully stripped off the red nail polish I had on and replaced it with a shade of pink that matched the flowers in my skirt. I smiled to think of how well I'd mastered the art of using makeup and nail polish in only one short week. I had watched Mary do it many times, but it never seemed to sink in, until now. Craig was generous with his compliments about my outfit, but I could see that he was getting very anxious to leave. My son, who hated the idea of shopping for clothes, now couldn't wait to get to the mall and shop till he dropped. Craig had a major league shopping list. He wanted to buy some makeup, new outfits he had seen advertised in his Young Miss magazine, and of course a couple of necklaces, some rings, and a bracelet or two, the typical wants, or should I say needs, of a 16-year-old girl. Craig shopped like a real pro. He'd spot an outfit that he liked in his size and add it to the growing collection of outfits he selected to try on. He'd select the best from the choices he made and hurry off to the dressing room with the maximum number of outfits that he could take in with him. Occasionally he'd come back out to ask our opinion about a dress, but for the most part he made his choices then came back to choose the next load. Sue was nice enough to wait with Craig in the junior size department so that I could enjoy myself in the ladies section. The styles in the junior section were very pretty and eye-catching, but they just weren't right for a woman my age. I needed dresses that were just a little longer and a little looser than the ones Craig liked, and the lingerie I preferred was much sexier than I would consider allowing Craig to wear. His cute little bikini panties were nice, but they were just no match for the black lace bikini panties that I love to wear, and he was far too young for the strapless push-up bras that I was buying as a little treat for myself. We shopped in every store that sold women's clothing or jewelry, and by the time we finished I was trying to imagine how I was going to pay my credit card bill. When I mentioned my concern to Sue, she shrugged and told me that I'd be making more than ever before and that she was sure I'd have no problem paying my bills. I briefly wondered what I was going to do with all of the clothes I had bought, but then it occurred to me. I'd have to work throughout the summer to pay my bills and get back on my feet, so why not just work a little longer to make use of my new outfits? It was amazing how well things were working out. Problems just seemed to resolve themselves. That evening Craig and I put on a fashion show to model all of our new outfits. We had a great time choosing outfits, coordinating our makeup and nail polish, mixing and matching skirts with different tops, pretending to be models at a fashion show. We were just about ready to end when Sue surprised us with several pairs of slacks and shorts that she had bought while we were in the dressing rooms. Those slacks meant so much to me and Craig. Sue was telling us that we had mastered our lessons in passing as females. It was sort of ironic that we had to master wearing dresses before we could start wearing pants, but Craig and I both saw it as the compliment Sue meant it to be and were about to model our new slacks when she stopped us. "Those pants are going to be pretty tight. I think you girls will be needing these." With that she tossed each of us a package containing what looked like an athletic supporter. "Directions are inside, read them carefully." I stared at the package in my hand, completely baffled at what it contained. The pink label with flowers on it said "one tuck-em-up belt," but the paper with directions was folded over, preventing me from learning any more. "Don't just stand there, ladies," Sue urged. "The directions are very good, but read them carefully to avoid a good deal of pain." I had a lot of questions, but Sue wasn't in the mood to answer them, so Craig and I took our slacks and other gift and went to change. I couldn't believe it when I opened the package and read the directions. What looked like some sort of athletic supporter was designed to hold my genitals inside my lower abdomen. If I followed the directions properly, I was promised a smooth flat front that would appear perfectly normal in the tightest pants, or even a pair of panties. I quickly removed my clothes and with trembling hands I pulled on the belt. I followed the directions, carefully tucking my genitals up into my lower abdomen and then allowing the wide elastic band of the belt to fit snugly against the opening to prevent anything from coming back out. I gasped for breath as one of my testicles sprang loose at the last second and got pushed in by the belt. The directions said it might take some getting used to, but I had no idea I was going to have to get used to being slowly castrated. I did my best to adjust everything to relieve the pain, then slipped on my panties and looked in the mirror. I was incredibly happy to see no sign of the bulge that had previously marred the look of my prettiest panties. I turned from side to side, checked over my shoulder, and still there was nothing. No bulge, no lump, just a woman in a pair of panties. I pulled on a pair of jeans that were nearly skin tight, and to my delight I was able to get them zipped without any trouble at all. The best part of it was that I looked fabulous in those jeans. My butt seemed to be molded perfectly, as were my hips, and the jeans tapered to my ankles, making my legs look nearly as good as they did in a dress and nylons. I knew exactly how I wanted to look. I removed my jeans, slipped my pantyhose back on along with the shell and camisole I had worn earlier. I slipped my feet into a pair of red heels, redid my lipstick, and went out to let Sue see her sexy little sister. Craig had beaten me to the punch and was busy modeling a pair of short shorts and a midriff top for Sue. He looked so cute in tight white shorts which emphasized his butt and hips, his top bulging just right over his bust, then showing off his tight stomach and small waist. He had his hair pulled back into a high ponytail and wore a pair of white girls' socks and a pair of pink and white sneakers. He looked sweet and innocent, a girl ready for school to end and summer vacation to begin, and that was exactly what he had become. I have to admit that I stole the show though. After all, a good-looking woman in tight jeans, heels, and lipstick that screams "kiss me" cannot be ignored. That day was another turning point for me and Craig. We could now dress casually, which opened up new worlds for us to explore. You don't often see women at the grocery store or running errands in dresses, and you rarely see girls Craig age in dresses unless it's a special occasion. We were limited to where we could go when we could wear nothing but dresses, but now with a little help and our belts we could plan mother-daughter outings to remember. It took an enormous amount of determination to get used to wearing that belt, but Craig and I were both very determined to pull off this little charade. I couldn't wait to start earning a living again and getting on with my life. I'd be getting on with it in a skirt and heels, but it had to be better than sitting around vegetating. Craig and I wore our belts day and night for 3 full days until we could honestly say that we didn't notice it anymore. We each had our own reasons for being so determined. I wanted to be able to go shopping for groceries without looking like Donna Reed, and Craig had his heart set on a bikini. It was a warm spring day and time for my debut. I had been spending way too much time indoors doing housework and learning to type with nails, and now it was time to enjoy the fruits of all of my labors. I slipped into a pair of tan pantyhose, threw a white knit top on over my bra, then tugged on a pair of tight jeans before stepping into a pair of blue flats. I applied a minimum of makeup to avoid attracting too much attention, brushed my hair, sprayed on a little cologne, and then it was off to the store. I was taking a big chance driving alone, dressed the way I was with a driver's license that said my name was Steve and my sex was male, but I had to do it. The danger only intensified the excitement. After turning off the car, I spent a couple of seconds checking my makeup and fluffing out my hair before I opened the door and stepped out. I won't lie and say I breezed right up to the store because truthfully I was scared stiff. It was a matter of minutes before I could get both feet out of the car and stand up. I checked my purse several times to make sure that I had my keys before I finally locked and shut the door. Just then a car pulled in next to where I was parked, a whole parking lot with empty spaces, and this person wanted to be next to me. How lucky could I get? I shouldn't have wondered. No sooner did I get to the other side of the next car than the door opened, and acting on a reflex I turned to see who was coming out, bringing me face to face with another woman. I smiled and nodded while we did a mutual comparison of how we were dressed. I must have passed her test since she kept walking, and I was left wondering how my legs had suddenly become rubber. Another test, another passing grade, I found myself thinking as I entered the store, feeling more confident about myself. I smiled at men and women I saw as I shopped, and even had a young man help wheel my filled cart out to my car for me. As he helped me load my car, I saw him giving me a quick appraisal and then smile, obviously happy with what he saw. He was far too young for me, not much older than Craig, with the same delicate build and facial features. I couldn't help but wonder if he'd look as pretty as Craig did in a dress. I monopolized the conversation over dinner that evening with tales of solo trip as a woman. Sue seemed amused and Craig jealous, but I couldn't stop going on and on about how great it was to walk around a store filled with people while I looked like a woman. I was truly hooked at that point and began to plan more and more trips to pick up a few things at the grocery store, fill up my gas tank 3 times in 1 week, or anything I could think of to go out as a woman. The last week of Sue's visit was a hectic one. She wanted to make sure that Craig and I were on the right track before she left. John wouldn't be here for a few weeks and she was worried that we might change our minds in that time. Just to make sure nothing would change, Sue got rid of every piece of men's clothing that I owned and left Craig just enough for school use. She also gave me another series of tapes to help reinforce my feminine feelings and encouraged Craig to wear some of my lingerie from time to time, knowing that a simple thing like that would be enough to keep him hooked. Craig and I were in tears when we took Sue to the airport for her return to California. We hated to see her go. She'd changed our lives so much, yet we knew that very soon we'd be joining her to start a new chapter in our lives. Craig and I both wore short denim skirts with roll-down socks and white sneakers. I wore a pink jogging top for comfort while Craig preferred a long-sleeved, white cotton shirt to look stylish. After Sue's plane had taken off, I decided to treat Craig to a little lunch, so we stopped at a fast food outlet near the airport. Thanks to my twice daily use of the Girl Talk throat spray and gargles Sue had provided, my voice was settling into a normal pitch range for a woman, so I did the ordering for both of us. Craig would nod or give an occasional one-word answer while trying to make his voice sound more like a girl. I was sure that once he started using the Girl Talk, his voice, which was just on the high end of the range for boys his age, would settle into a very pleasant-sounding girl's voice in a short period. Once his voice settled properly, I knew he'd quickly overcome his fear of being read. No one was going to think a sweet young thing with a voice that sounded like sweet music could be a boy. "Mom, I'm kind of scared," Craig whispered as we ate. "I never thought something like this would ever happen, and I'm not sure what's happening to me. But I thought you enjoyed this sort of thing, Lori. I didn't notice any hesitation when you were trying on different outfits last week." I wasn't sure what could possibly be bothering him, but even as his dad I would have been concerned. "Sort of," he said, almost on the verge of tears, his voice breaking. "I kind of got started fooling around with Mom's clothes, and that was sort of fun. Mom bought me a few things to wear and we sometimes pretended that I was a girl, but I never thought. I never did either, honey. I wanted so badly to hold him tight and tell him that everything was going to be fine. This is all completely new to me too. What's scaring you so much?" "Well, it's just that up to now it's been just fooling around, now it's getting to be real," he whispered frantically. "I mean, look at me. I'm out in public wearing a skirt and a girl's shirt, I'm wearing a bra and girl's underwear, and that's not even mentioning the fake boobs. You look perfect, honey. No one thinks you're a boy. Don't let it worry you." "But Mom, that's the trouble." Tears began to form in his eyes. "Even I don't think I'm a boy anymore. At least I'm sure not thinking like a boy." I handed him a tissue from my purse to keep his makeup from running and listened patiently as he explained how he'd been noticing more and more changes which he couldn't seem to control. He told about how he no longer found girls attractive, he was interested in their outfits, their hair, and makeup, but not them. Boys, on the other hand, were beginning to get to him. A few boys he'd gone all through school with were now looking more and more interesting to Craig. He found himself daydreaming about what it would be like to go on dates with these boys, to have them put their arms around him and hold him, and especially what it might be like to be kissed by them and to kiss them. "I understand completely, Lori," I said, trying to ease his fears. "My sister said that this was going to happen. It's all part of what has to happen to us by this summer. I have to become a woman and you have to become my daughter. Between the hormones we've been taking and those tapes we listened to, we don't have much chance at remaining males." "You mean those tapes Aunt Sue gave me did this to me?" Craig was shocked and I was stunned. I thought that Sue had explained everything to him. Why didn't she tell me what they'd do to me? "I'm sorry, honey. I honestly thought you knew what was going on. The pills you're taking will put your male hormones on hold for a while and make you feel a little different, but the tapes were meant to really make you think of yourself as a girl." "God, did they ever?" Craig exclaimed. Friday I told a girl that she really looked great in her new outfit. She just looked at me kind of weird-like and walked away. A couple of days before that I saw this really pretty dress at the mall and I wanted to try it on so badly that I almost cried. I understand completely, I said with a laugh. A couple of days ago when I woke up I just had to wear some of the sexiest lingerie I could find. That was the day I wore that red dress with the Take Me Now pumps. One night of listening to those tapes and I ended up in the cutest little baby doll nightie. Now when a man looks at me I just enjoy it and smile at him. I don't seem to have any choice, it's just what happens. But how do you feel when a guy looks at you like that? I feel wonderful, sexy, and feminine, Lori, just the way you're going to feel. I work very hard to look pretty and it's nice to see that it's appreciated. It's not easy picking out just the right outfit then doing my hair and makeup just right. If men didn't look I'd be upset. And if a guy asked you for a date? Craig asked with a smile. That's a good question, I answered. I don't really know what I'd do. I guess I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. You'll probably have plenty of chances to decide for yourself. Craig was so busy baiting me that he had forgotten that he was going to be a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy magnet. What am I going to do if a boy asks me out? His voice cracked with uncertainty. I think that if you just quit worrying about it everything will work out okay. It certainly has for me. I hardly ever worry about going out this way. It seems perfectly normal for me to look like this. It's going to be tough for a little while longer and then we'll be out of here. I told him in as soothing and motherly voice as I could muster. Of course once we move you won't be able to switch back until I can pay off some bills and get my act together. Until then it's strictly my daughter Lori, okay? Craig nodded his agreement even though he was still unsure of what was happening to him. That wasn't terribly important right now though. After 2 weeks I knew that he was bound to be hooked on those tapes and day by day they'd make him more comfortable with being a girl. He couldn't possibly back out now. Craig and I worked hard on perfecting our femininity over the next month. I went about my normal daily routine as Jackie and when he wasn't in school Craig had no further problems becoming Lori. We went to a few movies, did some shopping, and even got Craig's ears pierced. His hair was long enough that his ears were usually covered so we were confident that no one would notice. Craig was thrilled and never once questioned taking another step towards becoming a girl. It was getting towards the end of the school year and Craig's class was putting on a little play which the parents were invited to attend. Since Mary died I hadn't been able to bring myself to go to any social functions or even school meetings. I knew that bothered Craig so that night while he performed his Aunt Jackie was right there in the front row offering him moral support. Wearing a white silk pantsuit and heels I had a lovely time. Craig took me to all of his teachers and proudly introduced me as his aunt. Everyone was very sweet and understanding when I told them that his dad was down south beginning a new job and that I was looking after Craig until he could join his dad. One of his female teachers confided in me that what Craig really needed was a woman's touch. His dad was doing his best, she said, but it would be better if there was a woman to help. I wholeheartedly agreed and assured her that I was doing all that I could to add feminine touches to Craig's environment and that come summer I was sure there would be many changes for him. Later that week Sue's fiancé John came to help me and Craig prepared to move. We met him at the airport and I recognized him immediately since he looked just like the John the first knew. No dress, no makeup, nothing feminine at all to my shock. I felt slightly silly standing there in a pale lavender-colored blouse and white skirt. "Excuse me," he asked hesitantly as I approached. "Are you Jackie Windmark?" "Yes I am," I pitched my voice to be as soft and sweet as the smile on my face. He hadn't recognized me at first, even with a picture of me in his hand. "I'm Jackie and this pretty young lady is my daughter Lori." Craig and I each got a hug and peck on the cheek before we gathered John's luggage and went to my car. We were about to load his luggage into the trunk when a young skycap appeared at our side. "Could I be of some help?" he asked politely as he smiled at Craig. The airline doesn't think passengers should have to struggle with their luggage and I agree with them. He hefted John's cases into the trunk as if they were filled with feathers. Why couldn't I do that, I wondered. When I had tried to lift one of his small cases I found it far heavier than I expected, yet this young man could pick it up with ease. Could I have changed that much in a few weeks? I gave the young man a generous tip for his help, but I noticed that he seemed to prefer the smile from Craig much more. "Oh, Mom, he was so cute." Craig giggled as we drove off. "Could I take him home with me, please? I promise I'll feed him and take good care of him." "I see someone's been taking her hormones like a good little girl." John smiled at Craig in the back seat, but his attention was still focused on the skycap. "You two look very nice, by the way. Sue did quite a job on you, I see." "I'm still amazed at how I've changed," I confided. "Not that I mind though. Actually, I think I've come to enjoy being a woman much more than I thought I would. Isn't it a wonderful feeling to stand there and let some man come to your rescue like at the airport? Most of them are thrilled to help a woman, and all they ask for in return is a smile." John had a faraway look in his eyes. It was obvious that this was an everyday thing for him. "What's it like in California?" Craig had finally given up on the skycap. "Do you really think I'm going to like it there? It's not as crowded where we live. It's a small town near the beach, only a few miles from a larger city where your mom will be working." John painted a beautiful picture of quiet small town life with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. "You'll probably spend a lot of time at the beach with Amy, but there's a nearby mall for your shopping enjoyment." "Boys?" Craig asked, his voice belying his uncertainty. "Are there many boys around? Lately I just can't seem to take my eyes off the cute guys at school, and it's driving me nuts." "Don't worry, sweetheart," John promised. "There's no shortage of boys in the neighborhood or at the beach, but you'll find that out soon enough. Just think, Lori," I joked. "Cute boys who won't mind it at all if you stare at them and smile." I watched Craig's expression in the mirror change from slightly puzzled to joy. The tapes had done a job on him. He was now looking forward to being the object of a boy's desire. In another week school would be over, and I had quietly scheduled him for an appointment at the hairdresser's, and all was set to make Craig over into Lori. Barb, the shop owner who had done such a magnificent job on me, was all set to give the works to Craig. He'd have a leg waxing, get his eyebrows shaped, his nails done, a new cute hairstyle, and just for kicks a complete makeover. Barb assured me that once she was done with Craig, he'd be thrilled with his new look and all of the male attention it would generate. As we helped John unpack, I couldn't help but notice that he brought all men's clothes. John, I wasn't really expecting you, if you know what I mean." "I understand, Jackie," he said, smiling. "But your sister and I decided that this part of your training could only be done by a man." "I thought you were going to help me act more like a woman?" I asked, feeling left out again. Had Sue changed her plans and not bothered to tell me? "That's right, Jackie," he flashed that boyish grin he always showed when he had something up his sleeve. "I'm going to teach you to act more like a woman by being your boyfriend for the next 2 weeks. Lori will have plenty of time to learn about boys, but that's a luxury you won't have. My job is to help you respond to a man as a woman." John explained that for the next 2 weeks we would be virtually inseparable. Wherever I went, John would be right beside me, opening doors, holding my hand, occasionally holding and kissing me as a man would do to a woman he loved. We would go to dinner, dancing, walks in the park, everything a couple in love would do. For 2 weeks John would be the attentive lover and I'd be the object of his desire. I was surprised to realize that instead of feeling revolted, I was looking forward to a man's attention. It was a hectic couple of weeks getting everything ready to move. Thank heavens John was there to help, or I would have gone crazy. We didn't have much to pack since we weren't taking any of our male clothes with us. I figured that we could always buy more later when we were ready for them, and most of our stuff wasn't worth worrying about anyway. John did most of the packing and taking care of the house while I practiced my typing, trying to get back to the 85 words per minute level I had been at before my nail tips had been applied. I worked at it feverishly, but it was difficult to pay very close attention when John would sneak up behind me and kiss me on the back of my neck. John was a master of the sneak attack. Sometimes I'd pass him and he'd smile affectionately, but other times I would find myself the recipient of a friendly pinch on the butt or even a passionate embrace and kiss. The first time we ever kissed, I was cleaning up the last of the breakfast dishes when John crept up behind me and began to nuzzle my neck. Soon his hands were gently rubbing my stomach, then my butt, and before I realized what was happening, he turned me to face him and leaned in to kiss me. "Relax, Jackie," he told me in a relaxing yet very seductive voice. "Let yourself go. You're a woman kissing the man she loves." I'll admit that I did try to resist, what was happening just didn't seem right. At least it didn't for the first 10 seconds or so. Then I guessed that weeks of high dosages of estrogen took their toll on me, and I opened my mouth to his probing tongue. After a few moments we broke off our kiss and I self-consciously began to adjust my hair and outfit. "Calm down, Jackie," John chuckled. "No reason to feel bad, we're just acting out parts in a play." "What a play," I thought as I assured John that I wasn't feeling in the least bit disturbed while trying not to kiss him again. I couldn't believe I had just kissed a man and enjoyed it. Enjoyed it? No, I loved it. I craved his strong arms around me. I wanted to feel his lips against mine and open my mouth to his tongue. John kept pulling little tricks like that while also giving me plenty of practice in handling myself on dates. One of our favorite dates was dinner and dancing. I would dress myself up in a beautiful dress with sexy lingerie, enticing perfume, perfect makeup, and John would be my handsome date. He'd compliment me on my outfit, tell me how pretty I looked, hold my jacket for me, open doors, and do all of the little things that a man would do for a woman. I learned to dance as a woman, to patiently wait in line for the restroom without fear of discovery, and of course how to respond as a woman to a man. I quickly had all of the necessary movements and gestures down pat. While dancing I'd sometimes lay my head on his chest or look up at him and smile contentedly. If he leaned in for a kiss I knew to smile, tilt my head back, and wait patiently for his lips to meet mine. When we finished the kiss I would look into his eyes, smile, and whisper sweet nothings to him. By the end of 2 weeks I was proud to know that there was nothing short of actually having sex that I had not learned to do and do as well as any other woman. In between our dates I found time to practice my typing skills. Before getting nail tips I had been able to type at 85 words per minute, but now with my tips the best I could manage was a modest 50 words per minute. Not bad for any secretary, but not good enough for this lady, so day after day I sat in front of my computer and learned to type all over again. I could have trimmed off my nail tips and kept my speed, but they were just too pretty to lose. Finally the day arrived when I could consistently type at my old speed. I typed letters, copied documents, spreadsheets, you name it, I typed it, and all at 85 words per minute. I was so thrilled that I jumped up and soon found myself hugging John and jumping up and down. In all of the years that I had known him I would have rather died than hug him, but now everything seemed right. Tears of happiness streamed down my face while John and I embraced. We held each other tight for several minutes as I told him how excited I was and listened to his congratulatory comments. "You're going to be one hell of a secretary," he said as he shared my joy. "You're pretty and efficient, a definite plus." I started to blush at his comments. Standing there in a short dress, the smell of my perfume wafting over me, I was thrilled at John's comments. I had worked so hard to make myself pretty, to master feminine gestures and speech, and it had all paid off. Finally, the day Craig had been waiting for arrived. It was his last day of school for the year, and he was so floating above the clouds. Knowing what a special day it was for him, I allowed him to wear a pair of my panties that I knew he adored. They were made entirely of white lace and always made me feel so sexy and special when I wore them that I would never let Craig borrow them before this. Today, though I knew he would have no classes, nothing he'd have to concentrate on, it was just a beautiful day to be a woman, and so I'd allow him that pleasure. He wore a pair of girls' shorts that were unisex-looking, a pair of white girls' socks since he didn't own any boys' socks, unisex-looking girls' sneakers, and of course my panties. He forced himself to finish his breakfast of toast and juice, kissed me goodbye, and nearly skipped down the street to school. Just in case the panties weren't enough to keep his mind spinning, I let it slip that I had a special treat for him when he got home, one he would never forget. Craig was back in a matter of hours and quickly ran to his room, emerging later in what I jokingly called his home uniform, a denim skirt with a pink t-shirt top, slouch socks and sneakers. He wore a minimal amount of makeup and had his hair brushed into a definite girl style and pink polish drying on his fingernails. He looked just like any other teenage girl, but that wasn't good enough. "Grab your purse, Lori," I told him as he blew his nails dry. "It's time for your surprise." "Can you give me just a hint, Mom?" he begged. "Just a teeny little hint, please?" "I'll do better than a hint, sweetheart. Today you're going to get a makeover at Barb's shop," I announced proudly. "I set this up for you a little while back and I've been dying to tell you about it." Today you're going to make the switch from part-time boy to full-time girl. Oh Mom, I'm so happy I could just cry. Craig began to blubber. I've always had sort of a secret fantasy about going to a beauty shop and now I get to live it. Go ahead and get your crying over with now, honey, I said as I offered him a tissue. You might mess up your makeup if you start crying after Barb's done with you. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small cassette player and headphones. Here's some music to listen to while we drive over there, I told him as I offered it to him. Craig took the proffered gift cautiously. Is this the one? He asked as he examined the tape. What's it going to do to me? I reached over to Craig and patted his hand. It's going to finish making a girl out of you, I told him. You'll feel more completely at ease after you listen to it. Craig looked at me, carefully examining my smooth, shapely legs, then let his eyes roam upward over my skirt and blouse to my face. There was still some hesitation in his eyes. Do you like being a lady, Mom? He asked. Yes, dear, I do, I answered without hesitating. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Craig smiled at me, then placed the headphones over his ears. Don't be in a rush to get there, Mom, he said with a smile as he turned on the cassette player. I want to enjoy this tape. I took the longer route to Barb's shop to give Craig time to enjoy his tape, and from the contented smile on his face I knew the tape had done its job. Craig wouldn't have any more doubts about wearing dresses, shaving his legs, or anything else that he'd have to do as a girl. He'd simply accept it as a normal part of his life from now on. I couldn't wait to see him around boys though. He'd suffered so much towards the end of the school year fighting the growing attraction he felt towards other boys. Now he could relax and enjoy the normal interaction and relationships of a girl and a boy. Barb was her usual cheerful self, greeting me with a hug and telling me how nice I looked. She may have said the same thing to every woman who walked through her door, but she really meant it, and her customers knew it. What woman wouldn't appreciate being told that her outfit looked great or that her hairstyle was very becoming to her? I know that it always made me feel better to hear Barb's compliments, and Craig seemed just as happy when she told me how lucky I was to have such a pretty daughter. Barb quickly got Craig comfortable in a styling chair and began to work her magic, first on his hair, then his legs, feet, hands, and face. She washed, then combed, cut, and rolled his hair. Then, while waiting for it to set, she set about giving him a pedicure and manicure, followed by tweezing his eyebrows and a facial. With every passing second, Craig was becoming the girl he used to dream about being. I watched in shock as Barb unrolled Craig's hair and brushed it out. His formerly light brown hair was now a dazzling shade of golden blonde. Even his eyebrows were bleached to that color, which seemed to give him that surfer girl look. Barb had trimmed his shaggy hair into a style that was very popular, sort of a careful wind-blown look that many young actresses had. As Craig looked at himself in the mirror, he began to smile, then started giggling. Oh Mom, it's perfect. How could I ever thank you for such a great gift? He asked as he threw his arms around me and began to dance with me. Letting go of me would be a good start, I laughed. You're squeezing so hard I can't breathe. You're silly, Mom, he exclaimed as he relaxed his grip but continued dancing me around the shop. But I love you anyhow. I gave Barb a healthy tip for her hard work, then set out for the local mall to pick up a few last-minute items before we left in the morning. While Craig picked out an assortment of makeup at a department store, I shopped for more of much-wanted bra and panty sets. I found that nothing lifted my spirits more than pretty lingerie, and although I didn't have many bad days, I attributed that to my collection of lingerie. John was amazed at how lovely Craig looked after his makeover. I've seen a lot of transformations in the past, Lori, but you are the best I've ever seen. If I didn't know about you, there's no way I'd believe you're a guy. Craig's expression changed suddenly, his smile faded and he seemed hurt. I am not a guy, he insisted. My name is Lori and I'm a 16-year-old girl. John was taken aback for a moment but quickly recovered when I reminded him of the tape Craig had listened to earlier. From now on he'd fight any suggestion that he was a boy and do his best to fit in as a girl. A quick apology and an invitation to dinner from John soothed Craig's hurt feelings. He kissed John on the cheek, then ran off to change into something prettier for an evening out. Soon we were zipping up each other's dresses. Craig was an angel in a short, red dress with a flaring skirt, while I chose a light blue dress with a straight skirt that hugged my recently developed curves and showed enough leg to provoke a healthy amount of male interest and female admiration. John was the perfect host to two lovely ladies, opening doors, holding our chairs, and even taking Craig for a trip to the dance floor. They made such a cute couple, appearing to all as a sweet young woman dancing with her father. John played his part perfectly, holding Craig gently while guiding him across the floor while Craig looked lost in a dream, a smile frozen across his face as his skirt brushed against his legs and his heels clicked on the dance floor. It was an evening I'll never forget. When we finally got home that night, John presented us with one last gift. "You're now officially females." With that, he presented us with birth certificates and driver's licenses made out to Lori Elizabeth and Jacqueline Marie Widmark, female residents of the state of California. As long as we didn't try to get married, no one would ever know about Steve and Craig. I felt a twinge of regret that they'd solved the problem of listing Craig's parents by showing them as Stephen and Jacqueline Widmark. John sensed my mood and explained that Sue felt that it would be best this way. After all, Lori couldn't have two females as her parents. I had been her dad and was now her mother, so Sue's odd reasoning made sense. Sort of. I still missed Mary, but she had always insisted that if anything happened to her I should go on for Craig's sake and try to provide a stable family for both of our sakes. I guess that was what I was doing. John dropped me and Craig at the airport the next morning and gave us both one last kiss goodbye. He'd be driving my car to California while Craig and I flew out. As we took off, I looked down wondering if I'd ever see Minnesota again or if I'd care. Sue and I had originally planned for me to stay only for the summer, but as things developed I decided to sell the house and move to California permanently. I could work as Jackie as long as I wanted, and Craig could even attend school as Lori if he wanted. I forgot to mention to Craig that I had actually signed papers enrolling him in the same all-girls school that Sue's daughter Amy attended. I hoped he'd understand the difficulty we'd have explaining my daughter leaving and my son coming to live with us. Sue brought that problem to my attention just before she left, and her suggestion to enroll Craig as a girl made perfect sense. I adjusted my pleated white skirt to avoid having my slip show, then settled back to enjoy the trip and the start of a new life. We were greeted in California by beautiful sunshine, warm weather, and of course Sue and Amy. Sue hugged me and we exchanged sisterly kisses while Amy and Lori held each other's hands and danced around in circles. "You look wonderful, Jackie." I knew that even as she was complimenting me, Sue was examining every inch of me for possible flaws. She wouldn't find any, I was sure of that. Everything was perfect, from my voice to the sleeveless blue dress with its short, pleated white skirt to the matching white satin and lace lingerie I wore. She finally had to admit defeat and went to greet Craig. It took a bit of doing to pry Craig and Amy apart. They'd been close in the past, but this was something entirely different. This time it wasn't a girl greeting her boy cousin, this was two teenage girls laughing and squealing in delight. "Lori, you are so pretty," I heard Amy say in between giggles. "You're going to be so popular around here. There aren't many girls as good looking as you. I can't wait to show you off to all of my friends." "Boys?" Craig asked, his voice filled with hope. "Do you know any cute boys?" Amy smiled and winked. "I think I could find a few cute ones for you, but why would you want me to?" Craig took a deep breath and explained all about the female hormones he'd been taking and the tapes that had made him start to think like a girl. "I had the biggest crush on the quarterback at school. He was so cute and sexy looking. I couldn't get him out of my mind, but I was just another guy to him," he explained sadly. "I wish he could see me now." "Don't worry, Lori," Amy explained. "You really won't need any help from me. You'll have guys camping out in our yard waiting to meet you." Craig self-consciously patted his hair, then adjusted the denim jumper he wore. He didn't say another word all the way home, but the look on his pretty face told his emotions as clearly as any billboard. The female hormones that had taken over his system were giving him the same feelings as any girl his age would have. He was on the verge of becoming a woman, and his desire to be appreciated as a woman by a man were driving him crazy. Finally, he was going to have some relief. We spent our first day getting reacquainted, me with Sue, Craig with Amy's closet. He and Amy were assigned the task of putting our things away, which soon turned into an opportunity to try on each other's things before they moved on to mine. As Amy hummed the music associated with stripping, she and Craig sauntered into the room doing a bump and grind routine as they began to remove the dresses they wore. First came their dresses, which they slowly stepped out of as they fell to their feet. Craig was wearing a black half-slip with matching bra he borrowed from me, and Amy had on a pair of her mom's white, lace-trimmed, tap pants and a matching bra. The slip and tap pants were next to go, leaving the girls in nothing but bras, matching panties and garter belts, and the attached nylons actually Sue's and mine, which they had borrowed for their little performance. They slowly and carefully unhooked the nylons from their borrowed garter belts, then threw them into the audience. The bras were next, leaving our daughters wearing nothing but very sheer panties. Amy was very nicely developed, but what caught my attention were the prominent nipples and slight protrusions of Craig's breasts. "You're looking pretty good there, young lady." Craig took my compliment while his face beginning to redden slightly. "Thanks, Mom, that was part of the reason for our little show. I wanted you to see how I was changing." Craig rubbed his hands over his budding breasts and smiled. "I can't believe that I'm growing breasts, Mom. It's so cool. Your butt is a lot cuter now too, honey. Have you noticed?" The hormones had done a job on Craig's entire body, making it softer and causing female sex characteristics to develop. In less than 2 months, my son had changed from a flat-chested, average young man to a pretty young lady with budding breasts. He had the sexual urges of a girl and soon would have a body that would fit those urges. No doubt about it, he was going to be a doll. The girls modeled a few more outfits before we had to call it a day. A few more strip routines revealed that Sue and I had very similar taste in lingerie, the sexier the better, and our daughters seemed to share those tastes. It was amazing, I thought, separated by half a continent, yet my sister and I had the same taste in clothes. Sue and I spent the next several days shopping and learning all about my new hometown. It was marvelous to be able to walk around in a light cotton sundress without stockings instead of the heavier clothes I was used to before. Just being out in the warm sunshine, my dress brushing against my bare legs and getting the start of a tan on my bare arms made my spirits soar. I adored the bright, pretty summer dresses and the cute sandals that allowed my polished toenails to peek out. Amy wasted no time at all in introducing Craig to all of her friends, and judging from their reactions, I could see that he had quickly captured the attention and hormonally supercharged hearts of several boys. I still had a little concern for Craig's ability to pass as a girl in the company of others his age, but it didn't take long at all to see the effect the tapes had on him. A cute guy with a well-muscled body struck up a conversation with him, and I watched in fascination as Craig smiled, brushed back his hair, and captivated the young man with feminine charm. The poor guy never really had a chance. His prey in a short, pink sundress had turned on him and devoured him with nothing more deadly than a pretty smile and nod of his head as the boy talked. When the conversation was over, the boy followed Craig's every movement, doing his best to accidentally end up wherever Craig happened to stop. I got my introduction to the beach a day after Craig when Sue announced that we were going to have a picnic. Silly me, I thought she meant at a park, so I chose a pair of shorts and a sleeveless top as my outfit for the day. When I saw everyone else in the family in their bathing suits, I knew something was up. "You can't go to the beach like that, Aunt Jackie." Amy looked at my outfit and laughed. Sue raised her eyebrows and in no uncertain terms told me to change into whatever bathing suit I preferred, but not to come back unless I was wearing one. "I don't know if I'm ready for the beach beauty thing yet, Sue," I argued when I returned, feeling a little exposed in my green two-piece suit. "Isn't this a little too daring?" I asked, indicating the high-cut legs and small cups which showed off my newest assets. "You look great, Mom," Craig told me after a careful examination that only another woman would have done. "Are you wearing your breast forms?" I wondered if anyone would notice, and I was thrilled that it had been Craig. "No, actually this is all me now." I proudly pushed out my chest to display what were now 32 B cups in a padded top. "You devil you!" Sue shrieked in delight. "You never mentioned that your breasts had grown. What did you expect after all those hormones I've been taking?" I asked. "Were you expecting a flat-chested little girl?" "Take your top off, Mom," Craig shouted. "Let's see how you really look." I resisted as long as I could, but it didn't take too much encouragement from the others to convince me. I really wanted to undo my top and let my breasts hang free for all to look at and compare. I had undergone an amazing change from a thinly built man to the beginnings of a well-built woman in a short period of time, and frankly, I was proud of my looks. I carefully undid the back hook of my top and allowed it to drop away from my breasts. "You look good, Jackie," Sue gently cupped my breasts in her hands. "I take it you're okay with this?" I pulled my sister close and held her tight. "Oh, Sue, I'm so happy. I can't believe how good I feel now." After a short embrace, Sue turned to Craig. "Lori, how do you feel?" Craig followed my lead and hugged Sue. "Oh, Aunt Sue, it's so nice to look pretty and have people notice me. I always wondered what it would have been like if I was a girl, and thanks to you I can find out. I wish it could be this way forever." Sue and I glanced knowingly at each other, smiling slightly so that only we could tell. Maybe Craig would get his wish. Down on the beach, I got past my foolish concern over being discovered and started to enjoy the sun, sand, and waves. It was so different laying on the beach, the straps of my top down and the hook undone, trying to get the perfect tan. Men walked by and stole glances at my butt when they thought I didn't notice. When I came back from a quick swim, the men on the beach watched closely as my breasts bobbed up and down. I've heard women complain about the feeling of being a piece of meat on display, but to me the attention was wonderful. These men were telling me that they appreciated my face and my figure. With luck, they thought that they might find out if my brain was a match for the rest of me. After several relaxing days on the beach, a new week started and it was time to look for a job. I spent Sunday afternoon in a bikini on Sue's patio, relaxing and working on my tan while checking over the want ads for secretarial jobs I could apply for. Sue had certainly been right about the job market. Secretarial jobs were there for the taking at pay rates in excess of what I had made as a man in my old job. I circled several of what I felt were the best opportunities, then planned my outfit for the next day's job hunting. I was up early the next morning setting my hair and making sure that everything I had done the night before had been perfect. My legs were smooth from the through shaving, as were my underarms. My fingernails and toenails were perfectly done in a pretty shade of red, just right for the professional woman. As I carefully threaded the straps of my garter belt through my panties, I felt the usual tingling sensation down my spine. I had really come to love the feeling of silky nylon sliding up my legs and the top pull of my garters as I took a step. When I first began wearing nylons, there had been several embarrassing moments when I had been overcome by the sensations of my nylon-clad thighs brushing against each other, but by now the estrogen had done its job in feminizing me, and those embarrassing moments were a thing of the past. I was a woman experienced with nylons, and now it was just an intense feeling of pride in my pretty legs that I felt as I attached the nylons to my garters. I cradled my pert little breasts in a padded bra, then covered it with a pretty lace camisole, then a white shell top that was just sheer enough to make out some of the lace of my camisole. I stepped into a short white half-slip, then carefully pulled on a knee-length white cotton skirt with a pink and blue floral pattern. It seemed to call to me when I was shopping one day, dressy enough for interviews and work yet comfortable enough to spend all day in, the best I could hope to find. I did my hair and makeup in an attractive style without going overboard on either. I didn't know if I'd interview with a man or a woman, so I couldn't take any chances. I finished dressing, slung a purse that matched my shoes over my shoulder, picked up a pretty lady's attaché case with my resumes in it, and set off to find me a job. I'd come to appreciate purses. Even as Steve, I never had enough pockets to carry everything I needed, and now as Jackie, my dresses and most of my slacks had no pockets. The pockets I did have on my jeans, for instance, were just for show. My slacks were so tight that fitting a piece of paper into a pocket would have required the skills of a magician. Now, with a purse on my shoulder, I had room for all my essentials like hairbrushes, makeup, perfume, and tissues, along with my wallet. I pounded the pavement the entire morning and afternoon, stopping only for a quick lunch. By the end of the day, I had dropped off about 15 resumes and gotten 4 interviews. I found it far easier to get an interview if a man was doing the hiring. I think that 2 of them interviewed me just to have a chance to sit and talk to a good-looking woman. They didn't seem in the least interested in my abilities to organize their schedule or how fast I could type, just in me personally. I decided that even if I did get offers from them, I'd turn them down. I didn't need the aggravation of keeping my boss at arm's length in addition to my job duties. That afternoon when I got home I gladly kicked off my heels, then changed into a pair of cut-off shorts, a midriff top and sandals. I enjoyed getting dressed up and wearing pretty outfits, but it just wasn't practical to spend the entire day that way. It felt so nice to put on a pair of shorts and a comfortable top, then walk along the beach or sit on the patio browsing the latest fashion magazine. Sometimes I imagined myself married to a successful man, leading a life of leisure, shopping for beautiful outfits in exclusive shops, having lunch at a swanky restaurant, then going home to try on my new clothes while the cook prepared dinner. Yes, that was a fantasy. Reality though was to survive as Jackie, which included helping my teenage son decide if he wanted to be a boy or a girl. He seemed so happy as Lori, playing volleyball on the beach with the other kids, sunning himself in his bikini, or lounging around the house in his shorts and halter tops. School would be staring in a few months and it would be time for Craig to decide what he wanted in life. I doubted that he'd want to go back to being a boy again, and I certainly couldn't blame him. How could anyone give up these soft clothes, the pretty underwear, makeup, and the thrill of having men look at you in a lustful manner? I ran my manicured hands along my smoothly shaven legs, and thought of how good it felt to wear stockings and how nice my legs looked in them. I thought that I might be willing to go back to being a man someday, but not now. I just couldn't give up my pretty dresses and feminine lingerie for pants and boxer shorts. It was just too much to ask of me right now. I wanted to enjoy this new lifestyle that excited me so much. I got an offer 2 days later and started work the following Monday and spent the weekend as frazzled as a girl before her first prom. I went through my closet dozens of times, putting together just the right look, then discarding it as soon as I'd completed it. One look didn't have the right shoes, another needed a different purse, a third needed a scarf in a pattern that I didn't have to make it work, and so on and so on. I was faced with the dilemma I used to poke fun at Mary over: a closet full of clothes yet not a thing to wear. Back then I couldn't understand how a woman could have so many clothes and not find anything to wear when she had something special to go to. Of course I was a man then, and all I had to worry about was whether I'd wear a dark blue suit or a dark gray suit. At one point I also owned a black suit, but that was the extent of my choices. One of 3 suits wasn't so hard to choose from. Now the pump was on the other foot, and I just had to have the right accessories for an outfit or the outfit wasn't worth wearing. It was summer and I couldn't wear dark blue pumps even if they did match my dress. Light blue was a possibility, but only with a dark blue dress. Of course that's a poor example. I wouldn't wear a dark blue dress in the summer when I had white dresses and light pink dresses, and floral skirts with brightly colored tops. I had so many pretty things to choose from, but I wanted everything to be perfect, which eliminated a large portion of my wardrobe. I loved my lightweight sundresses, but I couldn't wear them to work. My red dress with the short skirt was beautiful and I looked fantastic in it, but it was just too fancy for an office. It took all day Saturday before I found just the right outfits and accessories to start my new job in. Sunday was hardly a day of rest for me. I was too busy experimenting with hairstyles and makeup to think of resting. I tried my hair up, down, curled under, curled all over, you name the style, and I tried it. I worked for hours trying to get just the right look with hair, makeup, and outfit, and would have probably kept going if Sue hadn't insisted I put on my bikini and join her at the beach to relax and check out the guys. Checking out the guys was a shock to me at first. I had been a typical guy who thoroughly enjoyed looking at pretty women and never gave a thought that they might be looking at men. I just assumed, as most guys I'm sure do, that women don't have those sort of desires. They never even take an interest in sex until they're married, and then just to make their husbands happy. Mary had never talked about men when we met, and I can't remember ever seeing her looking at another one while we were married. Now I realize that it was only because I was too busy looking at women to notice her looking at me. Sue, on the other hand, had no problem at all looking at the men who walked by us and commenting on them to the point of making me blush. A guy would walk by and take a look at us, which resulted in his being rewarded with a smile from one or both of us as he passed. Then Sue would proceed to comment on the size of his butt, his chest, his muscles, and inevitably the bulge in his swim trunks. Sue wasn't shy or circumspect about her observations, often mentioning the size of the bulge in a man's trunks and what she wished he'd do with it. I'd have to say that finding out that women looked at and judged men's physical characteristics as much as men did to women was nowhere near as surprising as realizing that I was beginning to do it too. At first Sue's comments embarrassed me, but then I started to notice what she was looking at and found myself becoming very interested too. Now that's what I call hung. I found myself thinking aloud as a really well-built guy walked by us. Wonder if he's available? And if he was? I heard Sue ask from the blanket beside me. Is my sister finally becoming interested in men? Your sister is becoming very interested in men, I sighed as the guy walked out of sight. She's very confused but very interested. John made a strong impression on you, didn't he? She asked with that smile that said she knew the answer. Showed you that being a woman is more than just pretty clothes? Sue, if you ever decide you don't want him, just let me know. I'll be happy to take him off your hands. I thought back to my first kiss as a woman, how John held me tightly and explored my mouth with his tongue. He made me feel so helpless, and yet I loved that feeling. Sorry, Jackie, he was just out on loan. From the smile on her face I knew she was thinking of John. You'll have to find your own if you want one. If I wanted one? How did I answer that? John made me feel sexy, desirable, and completely female. I was relaxed with John because I knew that I was completely safe, but could I relax that way with another man? Would I feel as safe as I had with John? Would I want to? I smiled but didn't bother to answer Sue's remark. I doubt that I needed to. She had everything planned out from the start, and John's triggering of female passion in me was no chance happening. She pushed me over the edge and she knew it. Now I'd have to handle an entirely new set of feelings to go along with a new body. I got up before my alarm went off on my first day of work. It didn't make much difference since I hadn't slept much the night before. I plugged in my hot curlers, then assembled the outfit I chose for that day, a dark blue sleeveless dress with a matching jacket. I slipped on a midnight blue garter belt, then carefully rolled on a pair of the silkiest nylons my favorite store sold. As I carefully inserted a pair of breast forms into the matching bra, I found myself looking at the developing valley between my breasts and wondering how much longer I'd need my breast forms. I couldn't wait for the day to come when I could wear a bra that wasn't padded or not have to bother with breast forms. I wanted to have breasts that could hold up a strapless gown. I wanted to be able to wear a skimpy little bikini and have men gaze at my breasts with unquenchable desire. I had the sluttiest of feelings, yet I was dressing and acting as the demure little secretary who wouldn't even kiss on the first date. I slid a matching full slip over my head, then ever so gently pulled it over my bust and hips until it settled just above the knees. There was something about slips that I adored, and my collection of lace-trimmed full slips was my personal treasure. I can't begin to describe the tingling sensation I felt as my slip slid over my soft body to dance around my legs, its lace hem and bodice proclaiming my femininity. Sometimes I thought of a full slip as a prison of satin and lace that I had no will to escape from. I set my hair, then carefully slipped on my dress and did my makeup before taking out my curlers. After brushing in a little setting spray, I had the perfect hairdo for a woman my age, long enough to swirl around as I moved my head, yet short enough to keep me from the trap many older women face of trying to pass as a much younger woman. I was proud of the way I looked. I had a nice shape, pretty face, and great legs for a woman in her mid-30s, so I felt no need to try to look younger. I checked myself over carefully in the mirror. My dress hung just right, my slip didn't show, my nylons were wrinkle-free, and my heels were a perfect match for my dress. I sprayed on a touch of perfume, then it was off to my first day of work as Jackie. I was shown to my desk and introduced to some of the others in the office that I would be working with, my boss Mr. Anders, and the Kathy, the office manager. Everyone was so nice. Several women complimented me on my hair and outfit, while several of the men took an opportunity to say hello and size me up. I got settled in at my desk, putting out a picture of Craig in a short pink dress, and quickly got to work with some typing Mr. Anders needed done. Before I realized it, the morning was over and it was time for lunch with a few women who had asked me earlier. Lunch was wonderful. I got to know many of the other women better, learning about their interests and families in a very short time. It was never like this as a man. We were always much more reserved when we talked. We talked about women, sports, cars, and other subjects, but never about our lives or families. It was far better getting to know others as a woman, I was sure of that. By the end of the day I had made several new friends, who upon learning that I was single gave me a thorough lesson in which men in the office were available and which were worth being pursued by. I thanked them for their help but explained that I wasn't ready for a relationship right then. It took several months and Craig starting to date to convince me that I'd been alone too long. My job just seemed to get easier as I got used to it. Typing was no problem with my speed, and since I'd always been a stickler for grammar and spelling, my work was considered to be some of the best ever done. I enjoyed my work and was thrilled to find that I was so appreciated by my boss. What more could a woman ask for in a job? Time seemed to fly by as I grew into my job as a secretary. I made so many new friends, both male and female, and was becoming quite the social butterfly because of the invitations to baby showers, bridal showers, Tupperware parties, and my absolute favorite lingerie parties. My Achilles heel turned out to be an obsession with pretty lingerie. No matter how much I had, and trust me when I say I had enough to open a small Victoria's Secret store of my own, I always saw a few pieces at one of those parties that were so cute that I just had to buy them. I justified it by letting Craig borrow some of my things whenever he had a big date or even when he just felt the need for something really pretty to wear. He may only have been 16, but I felt it was so important that he nourish his newfound femininity. My lingerie and a closet filled with pretty outfits kept him and my niece happy. There was a slight downside to my new life, and strangely enough that turned out to be clothes. As Steve, I could buy a pair of pants according to my waist and inseam and generally get exactly the right fit. Now as Jackie, dresses were sized according to some odd standard. What size I wore depended on my bust size, my hips, and even my height. Slacks no longer came in just the right size, so in my free time I decided to learn how to hem slacks, skirts, and dresses to make them fit better. Skirts were a little better, I only had to worry about waist size and my hips when I shopped for them. I was very proud of my figure. I was a size 9 when I started wearing dresses months before and worked hard to stay that size through aerobic workouts, walking, and bike riding. Occasionally I'd wear one of Craig's casual skirts and tops to a picnic or a really pretty dress of his that caught my eye to a party. I'd smile at my girlfriend's amazed expression when I told them that no, it wasn't new. I had borrowed it from my 16-year-old daughter. Many of my friends borrowed things from their teenage daughters, but it was only a pair of pantyhose or shoes. I was the only one of us who could fit into her daughter's outfits. Every week found me feeling better and better about myself. I was pretty, in excellent shape, had a wonderful family, and a well-paying job. I couldn't imagine how things could be any better with one small exception. I was so lonely. I just don't know what to do with myself, Sue. I confided in my sister one day when I found myself feeling very low. I have volunteer activities, my job, and the family, but I can't help feeling that something is missing. I've been watching you mope around here, Sue told me. You talk about how wonderful your job is and how well Craig is doing, but it's easy to see what's missing in your life. You need some romance. I think we pretty much ruled that out when I started dressing this way, I sighed. It's tough to get a date with a woman when you're wearing a dress and heels yourself. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Sue insisted, her voice taking a hard edge. There are plenty of guys who would love to date a woman who was pretty and intelligent, a woman like you. Some of my girlfriends have been trying to set me up with one of the guys at the office, but I just don't know. Don't know what? Sue asked sarcastically. You don't know if he's good enough for you, if he's rich enough for you, or if he's man enough for you? Suddenly I became very defensive. He's good enough, and I don't care if he's rich or not. Then you just don't think he's man enough for you. Sue shrugged her shoulders. You want a real stud, someone who makes you damp just thinking about him. A man that can make you scream? Sarcasm doesn't become you, Sue dear, I quickly retorted. I'm not sure I want a man at all. If you can't date women, there's not much of a choice left, Sue replied glibly. Knock it off, Sue, I screamed. You know what I mean, I'm just not sure I'm ready to date a man. Listen carefully, Jackie, Sue said calmly. You're a beautiful, intelligent woman who is very lonely. There's only one cure for that, and you and I both know it. You've been a woman for almost 5 months now. You dress, act, and hold down a job as a woman. Now forget about Steve and start enjoying yourself as a woman. Let some nice guy take you out to dinner or a movie, let him whisper in your ear, hold you, kiss you, and make you feel like a woman. You won't regret it. But I started to say something, but Sue was done listening. Shut up and live, okay? Was all she said before walking out of the room. The next morning at work, I hesitantly confided in my girlfriends that I was ready to date again. They were thrilled and couldn't wait to start helping me choose the lucky guy who'd get a chance to date me. There was one who interested me, but I was told that he was just a bit on the shy side and that I would need to encourage him. He was very good-looking, tall, well-built, and considered to be a real catch by the other women, so I decided that he was to become my first male conquest. Thanks to information gained by my girlfriends in the office, I was able to learn all about Frank, the first test of my feminine charms. They had managed over time to learn his favorite color, his interests, what he looked for in a woman, and dozens of other snippets of valuable information which they happily turned over to me. The poor man never had a chance. He was a gift just waiting to be wrapped up and taken home. That evening I told Sue what I was going to do, and we had a fantastic time putting together a skirt and top outfit that just happened to combine Frank's favorite colors, and in just the style he liked seeing on a woman. The next morning, dressed in my new outfit, I stopped by Frank's desk for a moment to ask his advice on a document I was working on. I noticed his eyes light up when he saw how I was dressed, and his nose twitched just a bit when he caught a whiff of the perfume I wore, his favorite of course. As the days passed, I added a few more pieces of bait to my trap. I'd find ways of coming to a door just in time for Frank to hold it open for me, then reward him with a big smile and very friendly thank you. I'd just happened to be coming out of a room as he was walking by, which of course required me to smile and say hello to him. Everything worked out very well, and soon we were stopping by each other's desk just to say hello and gab a little bit. Then after 2 weeks of talking, Frank asked if I'd like to attend an oldies concert that was coming to town. Fortunately, I didn't have to pretend an interest in that type of music. It had always been my favorite. I smiled enthusiastically and said I'd love it. Craig was a little concerned about my going out on a date, but I reminded him that I had never said a word to stop him when he began dating. We had sat down and had a very serious mother-daughter talk about what he could expect on a date with a boy. We laughed until we cried as we talked about kissing, petting, and how to handle an oversexed teenage boy. When it was all over, I was sure that Craig would certainly handle himself as a proper young lady without being too prim and proper. I gave him my blessing to date, provided the young man acted as a gentleman and treated Craig as a lady. He'd been on many dates since that first talk, and now it was my turn to enjoy a little male companionship. Frank rang my doorbell exactly on time the night of the concert. I smiled, happy to see him, then took him by the hand and introduced him to Sue, John, and Craig. Frank was a perfect gentleman, paying attention to me after meeting the others, even though Sue and John looked very pretty in tight jeans, midriff tops, and heels. John was a knockout as a woman, but Frank never gave him a second look. It was the sweetest gesture I'd seen in a long time, and vowed to say thank him in a special way once we were away from the house. Frank opened the passenger door of his car for me to enter. I smiled and slid in, making sure my denim skirt didn't ride up too far on my thighs. I wanted to let Frank get a quick glimpse of my thighs without revealing too much. The old advertising slogan of selling the sizzle, not the steak, and Frank seemed to enjoy the sizzle. The concert was a blast. When I was a teenaged boy, I could never understand the way the girls felt about the lead singer for one of the groups. Now though, I looked at him differently and realized that 25 years later he was cute. Maybe handsome would be a better word to use in describing a man in his mid-40s, but there was something about this guy's still boyish face that made him look, well, cute. Just before the end of the evening, the last act began to play the slow, romantic song that had been a hit for them in the past. I thought the song was nice before, but now, with all the female hormones in my body, I was moved to tears as I listened. Frank noticed me crying and asked if there was anything he could do to help. "Hold me, Frank," I pleaded. "Take me in your arms and hold me tight." We spent the next half hour holding each other, even though the song had ended after a few short minutes. Frank's arms were so strong, his chest was so comfortable that I couldn't tear myself away from him. I looked up at him and smiled. "You're sweet, do you know that?" He looked down at me, carefully wiped away a tear, and kissed me softly on the cheek. "You're sweet too, Jackie," he said in a voice so soft that it made me tingle. "A pretty and special lady too. I hope we'll be able to go out again sometime." "Just ask," I whispered in his ear as I gave him a kiss on his cheek. "All you have to do is ask." We looked in each other's eyes for a moment, then our lips met as our arms pulled each other closer. My girlfriends at work were right, Frank was a real catch and I had caught him. Now what did I want to do with him? When Frank drove me home, we took a little detour and stopped to talk and get to know each other better at a local ice cream stand. We sampled each other's ice cream, we laughed and talked, and before long I was falling in love. I seemed to enjoy everything about Frank, his face, his voice, even the way he held an ice cream cone. There was nothing about this man that I didn't think was special. We were acting like a couple of silly teenagers, but it was lovely as far as I was concerned. I was feeling like I did when I first met Mary. Frank walked me to my door when the evening finally had to end, but we managed to spend a few moments exchanging goodbye kisses. As I walked into the house, I never noticed Sue sitting on the couch staring at me until her voice broke into my dreams. "Man enough?" was all she said. "Without a doubt." I giggled. "He's strong, he's handsome, he's wonderful. I take it he makes you feel pretty good?" She pressed, not content with a quick answer. She wanted everything. Very good. I wasn't going to give in to her little game. If she wanted details, she'd have to ask nicely. I couldn't wait to tell her about how wonderful Frank was and what a great time I had, but she was going to do things my way first. "Better than your sexiest lingerie?" "I beg your pardon?" What in the world was she driving at? "Does he make you feel more like a woman than your sexiest lingerie does?" Sue patiently explained. "And does he make you damp?" I blushed as I suddenly realized that my panties actually were a little damp. How did that happen? The words flowed freely after that. If I could fit Frank under my dress, I'd be the happiest woman in the world. I giggled like a schoolgirl. He brought out feelings in me that I didn't know were possible. It was sort of like the way it was when I was with Mary, but yet it was so different. You didn't have female hormones in you back then, now you're experiencing what Mary was feeling. Now you have the feelings of a woman. Sue smiled, then gave me a hug. "Now are you going to tell me all about your first date?" I told her everything, how Frank held me as we danced, the feeling of security in his arms, the thrill of his tongue probing my mouth. Sue smiled and asked a question now and then, but other than that I had the stage to relive one of the most thrilling experiences of my life. From then on I dated more often, occasionally with other men, but mostly with Frank. We sometimes went to a movie or a concert, but the times I enjoyed the most were when we were alone at his apartment. Frank would pick me up on a Saturday afternoon and take me to his place where I'd prepare dinner for us. After dinner we'd clean up, then snuggle up for an evening of movies we had rented. Frank didn't seem to mind in the least that I preferred watching romantic movies, even though he enjoyed horror movies. In fact, it worked out well both ways. When I was watching a romantic movie, I just loved having Frank hold me and kiss me on the back of my head. When we watched horror movies, it felt so good to snuggle up in Frank's strong embrace, knowing that he'd protect me from the monsters. I had forgotten all about the past until the day Craig asked if he could ask me about something that was bothering him. "Well, of course you can," I told him as maternal feelings overcame me. My baby had a problem and I had to help overcome it. "Is it about a boy?" "Sort of," he said with a shrug. "I'm the boy." I looked at the young woman sitting in front of me, her low-cut top allowing her breasts to peek out, her nails long and polished, her makeup just perfect. It took a few seconds before I remembered that I was really looking at a boy, my son. "Yes," I said softly. "I remember. Is that what's wrong? Do you want to be a boy again?" "I'm not sure, Mom," Craig said, his voice breaking and tears forming in his eyes. "I guess we have to go back though. School starts soon." "Yes, I know," I smiled, trying to ease his pain. "How would you like to go back to school with Amy?" "As Craig?" he asked. I don't think I could. I couldn't stand having those feelings for boys again and not being able to do anything about them. I guess I've gotten too used to being a girl, but I couldn't help it. The clothes are so nice and so pretty. I really think I'd miss wearing pretty dresses and makeup. I think I would too. I smiled as I thought of the drawer filled with lingerie in my dresser. I knew I wasn't ready to give it up, but it would be Craig's choice. What if you could keep your pretty clothes and not have to worry about your feelings towards boys? But what about school? Wouldn't I? You're already registered to return to school with Amy in the fall. It's an all-girls school though, so you'd have to stay as Lori and wear the uniform blazer and skirt. I saw Craig's eyes blaze in delight. Oh Mom, that would be super. I promise to be the best daughter you could ever hope for. Craig smothered me with kisses as the tears rolled down his smooth cheeks. I had been a little worried when I had signed Craig up to attend school as a girl, but I could see that it had been the right decision. Craig obviously wanted to remain a girl. Now I had to decide I wanted to remain as Jackie, a woman and mother. I sat down that evening with a calculator, pencil, and paper to get a look at my finances. It wasn't pretty. I had charged quite a bit of clothing in preparation for becoming Jackie, and those bills were all coming due now. My job paid well, but after paying my old bills and my current ones, I wasn't going to have much to stash away to be used when I went back to being Steve. The way it looked, I would have to spend about 2 years as Jackie before I'd have enough to move back and get a job as Steve. I smiled to myself as I put away the calculator. Surely Craig wouldn't mind spending the next 2 years as Lori, and he'd probably be thrilled with the idea of going to his prom in a gown, and I would have 2 more years of pretty outfits and silky lingerie. Last but not least for me, there was the idea of 2 more years of Frank's strong arms, his broad chest, his passionate kisses, and his wonderful embrace. It had only taken a few months of work to maneuver past several other women and land the full-time position as Frank's girlfriend, and I was delighted to be able to keep that job for another 2 years. I noticed a change in Craig shortly after I told him that he'd be spending the next 2 years as Lori. He spent less and less time with Amy at the beach and the mall and began helping out at a local daycare center where he became a sort of Pied Piper to the children. The owners of the daycare center called me one day to tell me what a wonderful daughter I had and how all of the children loved Miss Lori, as they called Craig. He was an instant hit with the children, playing games with them, reading them stories, and most importantly calming their fears when their parents left. Several children who had been known to cry and mope about for hours suddenly started kissing their parents goodbye and running straight over to Craig, who greeted them with a smile and a hug. "What's going on, Lori?" I asked that evening when he came home. "I never knew you liked kids." "I've always loved being with kids, Mom," he lamented. "But who would ever hire a boy to babysit or work at a daycare center? The girls in my class could get all of the babysitting jobs they wanted while I sat home and cried. People always thought that girls were the only ones who could take care of babies or other kids, so now that I'm a girl I can do what I've always wanted to do." Craig was always in demand as a babysitter. Many parents had children who were absolute demons for other sitters, but angels when Craig sat with them. I often watched him with his little charges and regretted that he'd never have the chance to become a mother. He would be perfect, I was sure of that. On the first day of school, Craig and Amy looked perfect in their blue skirts, white blouses, and blazers, their hair pulled back and a light touch of makeup on their pretty faces. Craig had become totally adjusted to living as a girl over the summer, and it was easy to see that he'd fit right in with Amy and the other girls he'd met over the summer. As they walked out to meet their friends, Craig stopped and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks, Mom. I've never been so happy in all of my life. I raised the sweetest girl in the whole world," I thought as I watched his skirt flip back and forth, his hips swaying like a metronome keeping time. Craig made friends at school as easily as he had at the beach over the summer. I had heard that there was a great deal of cattiness between the girls at the school, but it never seemed to bother Craig, who soon found himself overwhelmingly elected president of the junior class. The school Craig attended had a reputation among the local boys as having the prettiest, most desirable girls, as students in a uniform from the Southern Academy practically guaranteed a girl that she'd have no problems finding a boyfriend. Craig was no different, and within a month he announced that he was going steady with a young man who had caught his eye. Just as I had done with Frank, Craig laid out an elaborate trap for a particularly cute boy, and before the boy knew what was happening he'd already surrendered his class ring, which Craig proudly wore as a necklace. The boy didn't seem to realize that he'd been caught in a trap, nor did he care. He had an attractive girlfriend and was the envy of many other boys. I sometimes spied on Craig and Dave, his steady, as they sat in Dave's car at the end of an evening. Craig would lean close and lay his head on Dave's shoulder, allowing Dave to feel protective by placing an arm around Craig and pulling him close. Of course, my poor little helpless daughter would be too weak to resist Dave, and soon they'd be kissing as if they had been the ones to invent the idea. If men only knew how hard we worked to trap them. After that, my job got so much better, especially with Frank stopping by now and then to say hello or sending me fresh flowers for my desk. My girlfriends took every opportunity to chide me about Frank, but it didn't matter. It was all in good fun, and it was a good feeling to know that someone cared about me. Okay, so cared is a little weak. It didn't take much to know that Frank was madly, passionately, in love with me. He told me every time we were alone together and often left little notes on my desk professing his undying devotion to me. I don't know if it's quite right to say that I was in love with Frank. Love was a word I tried very hard to avoid. I couldn't afford to be in love with Frank if I really wanted to go back to being Steve, so I told him that I did have strong feelings for him. I couldn't honestly say that I loved him. There were several times that I considered breaking up with him, but I rationalized staying together because of the awkwardness it would cause at work. Still, Frank wouldn't be put off promising to make me love him by being the sweetest, most lovable man a woman could ever hope to find. My strong feelings rapidly began to change into love, which caused me many a sleepless night wondering how I could ever live up to Frank's belief that I was the perfect woman for him. Summer had ended, fall and winter had passed when Craig rushed into my room one evening to breathlessly announce that he and Dave were going to the prom. I was laying on the bed wearing only my slip, bra, and stockings, having just kicked off my heels and hung up the dress I wore that day when Craig broke the news to me. "You've got to help me find a dress, Mom," he gushed. "It's gotta be the prettiest dress a girl ever wore so that Dave will think I'm pretty. I keep telling you not to worry about what boys think," I answered sternly. I wasn't about to have my daughter judge herself by some boy's standard. "You are a very pretty young lady. You have lots of friends and everyone thinks you're wonderful. My girlfriends would give anything to have such a smart girl for their daughter." "But Mom, this is for Dave," Craig pleaded. "He's not just a boy. He's the cutest, sweetest, dreamiest boy in the world, and I'm his girl. He's so nice to me that I just have to look my prettiest when he takes me to the prom. I just have to." "All right, enough already," I begged for mercy. Craig was normally such a level-headed young woman, so I could afford to let him be taken over by the female hormones for his first prom. I remembered how much fun it had been for me to watch his final makeover into Lori last spring. It would be a pleasure to help him shop for the perfect dress. We spent the next 3 weeks trying on gowns in stores far and wide, but nothing caught Craig's eye until we stopped into a small dress shop. After a few minutes of searching, I heard him cry out, "Here it is, Mom," he called excitedly. "The perfect dress." The dress was heavenly, pale yellow with long, sheer sleeves tapering to the wrists from a puffed shoulder and fastened with white pearl buttons. The chiffon skirt was tea-length with soft pleats requiring a full petticoat-style slip to avert prying eyes and make the skirt stand out just enough. I just knew it would be perfect on Craig. He quickly rushed off to try it on while I looked over the selection of cocktail dresses, where I found a cute chocolate brown velvet dress with a handkerchief hem and a belt accented with tiny sequins. I found one in a size 9 and instantly felt the need, or more accurately the compulsion, to try it on. My prize fit perfectly, hugging my curves and showing enough leg to keep Frank interested. I looked at myself from every angle in the dressing room mirror and in seconds decided that the dress was meant for me. I shopped a little more while waiting for Craig to model his gown for me, but nothing really matched that brown dress. When Craig walked out of the dressing room, he was a vision of loveliness. A girl at the critical stage of becoming a woman. The dress fit beautifully, drawing raves from many of the other women in the shop. Craig would turn many a young man's head at the prom, and there was no doubt that Dave would be proud to have such a beautiful girl as his date. We picked out all of the accessories Craig would need for his gown: matching pumps, a pretty yellow clutch purse, a gold necklace that spelled Lori, and a pair of diamond earrings. Of course, Craig would have to spend most of the day of the prom at the beauty shop just like dozens of other girls, but that was a small sacrifice he'd make to look good for his boyfriend. I was becoming as excited as he was as the big day approached. Finally it was there, the day of Craig's first prom. The girls attending the prom were permitted to take the day off for their all-important makeovers, but the boys had to wait until noon for their classes to end. Some complained of discrimination, but if they had to have their hair and nails done, their legs waxed, and get a facial, they'd have soon realized that the girls just had to start earlier. In any case, once they saw how pretty their dates looked, all objections to the girls having a day off melted away as pounding hearts and hormones took over. I dropped Craig off at our favorite shop on my way into work that morning and promised to stop again on the way home. It was a good thing that he and I had discussed these plans earlier in the week, because from the moment he opened his eyes his thoughts were focused on his hair, makeup, and gown. The prom was the topic of discussion for my girlfriends and I at lunch that day, comparing our daughters' dresses and what it was costing us. I felt sad when the discussion turned to what it was like when we were young. I'd never been to a prom and had certainly never worn a dress until last spring. Suddenly I felt that I had missed so much. I wished that I could have been like Craig and had a closet full of pretty dresses, a boyfriend who adored me, and most of all a chance to wear a beautiful dress and go to the prom. I'd have to be happy with living out my fantasies through Craig. He'd be the girl I should have been. Craig was stunning when I picked him up that afternoon. His shoulder-length blonde hair had been touched up to a rich, golden blonde shade, trimmed and permed so that it fell in gentle waves, curling as it brushed his shoulders. The bangs that curled across his forehead lent a touch of childlike innocence to his expression that boys found impossible to ignore. His brows were thinned out from the somewhat bushy style he had before so that they were just a thin, delicately arched line which helped focus attention on his deep blue eyes. Craig was a delicate, lovely flower waiting for the gown, heels, and makeup that would complete the bouquet. With little more than 2 hours left to dress, Craig dashed to his room, unbuttoning his shirt and jeans as he ran. Amy, who had gotten home earlier from her beauty appointment, was already sitting at the vanity in her slip, adding the finishing touches to her makeup. "Lori, you look great!" she exclaimed as Craig began removing his shirt. "I wish I had your lashes. My eyes are so deep set and they'd really help to make them look better. I wish I had your face too while we're at it, and your boyfriend too. You're already too much competition when boys are around," Craig laughed as he stepped out of his jeans. "And where did you get that lingerie? It's absolutely ravishing." Amy looked at the matching satin slip and bra she was wearing. "Oh, this old stuff?" she said with a devilish laugh. "Just something I had laying around." While they playfully argued, I quietly slipped away to get some things I had picked out for Craig. I held out a matching set of cream-colored lingerie decorated with pale yellow lace. "Try these on, Lori. I think they'll fit." Craig examined the offerings carefully as a smile crept across his face. "They just happened to be the stuff I was looking at in the mall last week." He held the long half slip against his waist and noticed where it ended. "Just the right length for my gown too." "What an amazing coincidence." "Look again," I urged, not wanting him to miss what else lay waiting in the bag. Craig gasped as he reached into the bag and pulled out the lace panties and garter belt I had bought for him. I knew my shopping trip after work last week had not been in vain. "Mom, this is unreal." "A garter belt?" "These panties and the garter belt, they're lace, nothing but delicate lace for my baby girl," I said proudly. I didn't think that the set would be complete without the matching garter belt. "There's a pair of nylons in there too." Craig was nearly in tears as he examined the set of lingerie that mirrored what Amy wore. Sue and I wanted the girls to share a special closeness that night, so we bought each a complete set of the sexiest lingerie to wear beneath their gowns. They would look like perfect young ladies on the outside, but underneath they would know that they were sexy women. Craig removed his bra and panties in seemingly one quick movement, then pulled on his new lace ones. He decided to leave his special belt behind since there was little chance of discovery beneath panties, garter belt, slip, and his gown. Months of female hormones had softened his skin and reduced his arm muscles, leaving behind slim, delicate arms which he slipped through the straps of the bra. He fastened it with care, then gently cupped his pert little breasts, setting them carefully into the lace-covered cups of his new bra. As he stared riveted to a spot in front of the full-length mirror, I dabbed a few drops of his, actually Dave's, favorite perfume in the valley formed by his developing breasts. The spell broken, Craig turned and kissed me. "You really know how to make a girl feel special, Mom." I watched as Craig sat on his pink comforter and carefully rolled the nylons up legs that had also become soft and well-formed from the hormones. It seemed so eerie for a few moments. Craig looked so much like his mother and even seemed to have inherited some of her mannerisms as he attached the nylons to his garter belt. I had watched Mary perform the same task and there was truly no difference between her and Craig. His nylons clasped firmly to his garters. Craig stepped into his slip, gently pulled it to his waist, then meticulously removed his gown from its hanger. "Could you help me, Mom?" he asked in a low voice as he held his arms above his head. I smiled and carefully placed the gown over his outstretched arms and gently pulled it over his head. Once he had it properly adjusted, I did the honors of zipping him up and doing the tiny clasp at the top. "Lori, you look so pretty," I sighed happily. "I'm so proud of you tonight. When this all started, I was worried about what I was doing to you. Tonight I know I did the right thing." "Thanks, Mom," Craig whispered softly. "You couldn't have done anything better. I love you." Those 3 words brought tears to my eyes. I had turned my son into a girl, possibly permanently, and it turned out to be his fantasy come true. Not only didn't he resent me for turning his life upside down, he loved me for it. A mother's dream come true. Craig spent a few minutes twirling around in his gown, showing off his petticoat just like a little girl enjoying a special party dress. Finally, makeup perfect, earrings and necklace in place, and a pretty yellow bow in his hair, Craig was finally ready for his date to arrive. Sue and I grabbed our cameras and film and joined the vigil, snapping a few shots of Craig and Amy alone and together as practice for the pictures we were anxiously waiting to take, the girls with their dates. The boys arrived at the promised time and were delighted to see how pretty Craig and Amy looked. These were the same girls they had seen on the beach in bikinis, shopping in the mall in shorts and tank tops, and even on some special occasions in dresses, yet they were different. The magic of their change had its effect on 2 boys who had joked with these girls, swam with them, and though they didn't think Sue and I knew it, had spent many moments in passionate embraces. Now they were respectful to the point of being awed by the girls. They carefully presented the corsages to the girls, who allowed them to pin them to their dresses, which was done so gently you would have thought the girls were made of the most delicate china which might shatter at any moment. Corsages in place, the boys finally relaxed and took their places alongside of the girls for pictures. I found it ironic that but for a decision made a year before, Craig might now have been at a girl's home in a rented tux having his picture taken by her parents. I never would have known the excitement and fun of helping a girl prepare for her first prom if I had decided to stick with pants instead of a dress. Prom night was the high point of Craig's life, and he talked about it every chance he got for months afterward. He couldn't imagine anything eclipsing that evening until he and Dave were crowned as homecoming king and queen for the nearby boys' school which Dave attended. Once more I had the pleasure of helping Craig select just the perfect gown, and it was every bit as much fun as the first time. I still have a scrapbook filled with pictures of Craig in his prom dresses and coronation gown which I take out and reminisce over when I'm feeling sad. They never fail to cheer me up. My life was filled with many little pleasures, such as Craig's gowns and his graduation from high school with high honors. Prestigious colleges were bidding for my baby to attend, but I was suddenly faced with being without him for the first time in my life. The only thing that helped me pass this time was Sue's announcement that she and John were getting married. I was to be her maid of honor and the girls were to be bridesmaids. We had a wonderful time picking out Sue's wedding gown and being fitted for our gowns. Mine was a red, off-the-shoulder, belted dress with a moderately low neckline and a 3-tiered skirt. The girls wore similar dresses but with a more modest neckline and red bows in the front. Sue was so beautiful, and it was so much fun that afternoon as the girls and I, clad in our slips and stockings to avoid messing up our gowns, helped Sue get ready for the most important day in a woman's life. She was a gorgeous bride, stunning in a white satin gown that sparkled as the pearl decorations caught the light. I couldn't help but hope that someday I'd have the chance to be in her place with my fiancé waiting at the altar to make me his wife. A week after the church ceremony, the girls and I put our gowns on again and joined Sue and John as they repeated their vows. This time though, Sue wore a man's tux which she had altered to fit her, while John looked lovely in a lovely white gown that rivaled the gown Sue had worn in its beauty. I was the maid of honor once again, while one of John's friends stood with Sue as the best man. John asked Craig and I if we'd mind helping him dress, and as his maid of honor, how could I have refused? We had a great time with John getting ourselves ready, and it was strangely exciting to be helping another man prepare himself in satin and lace to be presented as a bride. John wore a pair of ivory satin panties with lace inserts along both sides, a breathtakingly sexy bra which of course matched his panties with push-up cups trimmed in lace, and a sweet little bow in the center of the front. After struggling into a lace-trimmed waist cincher, he threaded the attached garters through his panties and clipped his sheer white nylons to them. Next came the white satin bridal petticoat, and after doing his makeup it was time for his gown. I felt John shudder as I helped him into the gown. "You're a lucky guy. Do you know that?" I asked. "Marrying your sister?" he asked as he fluffed out the skirt and petticoat. "I guess I am." "No, silly, getting to wear this heavenly gown." I couldn't help but giggle as I corrected his mistake. "I'd kill to be wearing this." "Maybe you will someday," he shrugged as I zipped up the back of his dress. "You never really know. I can't imagine a woman finding me attractive, and I certainly don't find them attractive." I sighed as I watched him fix his wig to his head with bobby pins. "I don't know what I'll do." "Marry Frank," John replied as though it were the obvious answer. "He loves you, doesn't he?" "Yes, that's what worries me," I answered as I helped brush out the back of his wig. "I can't marry another man." "Do you love him?" "I think so." I stepped back to avoid being sprayed as John applied his perfume. "But I can't." "We're getting nowhere fast here," John laughed at my confusion. "You're not attracted to women, you love Frank, Frank loves you, seems pretty simple to me." We let the subject end at that point. I was getting too confused, and it was time to head for the church. Craig was his usual lovely self as he drove us to the church where Sue waited for her bride-to-be. The music started to play, we put on our best smiles, and soon Sue was lifting the veil from John's face to kiss her pretty wife. Craig and Amy left for college a little while later while Sue moved in with John, leaving me alone in an empty house. Frank and I continued to date and had many a passionate evening in my new home after I prepared him one of my many special meals. He never stopped telling me how wonderful I was and how much he loved me, and confusing though it was, I never stopped enjoying it. Craig breezed through college and was courted by some of the best companies in the country. As a reward for his graduating from high school with high honors and graduating summa cum laude from college, I gave him a present which helped make his life complete. At his graduation, I gave him plane tickets and the reservation information for the hospital which was waiting to make him into a complete woman. Today Lori is known as Mrs. David Marcinko and is the proud mother of 2 beautiful little girls which she and her husband adopted. 2 years later, I finally saw the logic of John's argument about Frank and removed the last obstacle to marrying Frank. I tried my best to explain my past to him, hoping that he would finally understand why I couldn't return his love and marry him, but it didn't work. Frank loved Jackie and I loved him, so there was only one thing to do, but I wanted to talk to Sue before I went ahead. "I can't stand it anymore, Sue," I cried one evening at her home. "I love Frank, I can't think of anything but him." "I think you know what you have to do, Jackie," she told me as she held me against her chest and stroked my hair. "You knew that before you came here, didn't you?" she asked softly. "But I just can't be sure." I sobbed. "I was married to the most wonderful woman in the world for 15 years, how can I throw that away to be a woman myself?" Sue smiled and excused herself, returning with an envelope in her hands. "Read this," was all she said as she put it into my hands. I couldn't believe my eyes. The letter was written by Mary not long before she died. "Dear Sue," it read. "I know that my time here is nearly over and I'm afraid. Not of dying, I've made my peace with God and know I'll be with him soon. What scares me though is what will happen to Steve and Craig after I die. Steve is a sweet man," Mary's letter continued. "Too sweet for his own good. He is a wonderful person, but somehow I've never been able to escape the thought that he would have been a better woman than a man. As Craig grew up, I began to notice that he seemed to have the same characteristics as Steve and would never fit into the typical role of a man in this world. When I caught Craig in my clothes, it wasn't much of a shock. It seemed the natural thing for him, which is why I permitted and even encouraged his wearing girls' clothes. Neither he nor his father will survive my death on their own. They will need to have someone strong beside them to guide them through life. That brings me to ask a very strange favor which only you can give to me. After I die, I want you to do whatever it takes to give them that strong person to guide them through their lives. I want you to help them strong, caring husbands who will love them and take care of them. Yes, I said husbands, Sue, it was not a mistake. I need you to do whatever you have to do to turn Steve and Craig into women who will be able to love and be loved. I'm sure Steve will argue and resist, but I'm sure that his feminine nature will flourish and take over once he's forced to confront it. Amy will be a big help to Craig, and I'm sure he'll take it much better than his dad will, but trust me, they have no chance as men. I'm leaving behind a pretty substantial insurance policy for you to use. Please, Sue, I love them both very much and you are their last hope. I was too stunned to speak. I read the letter over again just to be sure, but there was no mistake. Mary had realized that Craig and I would fall apart after her death, and as if according to plan we did. Sue waited as long as she could, not wanting to have to follow Mary's last wishes, but a year after Mary's death she knew it had to be done. Look at yourself, Jackie, you can never be a man again. Sue told me after I finished reading the letter for the third time. Your body has changed so much that it would be impossible to go back. Go to Frank, he loves you and you love him. Mary wanted it this way. That was all it took. A great burden had been removed from my shoulders, and not long afterwards another one was removed from elsewhere on my body. Sue was my matron of honor, Amy, Lori, and John were bridesmaids, and I was the loveliest bride ever to say I do. I finally got to wear the gown of my dreams, walk down the aisle and marry the most wonderful man ever to live. Frank and I have a wonderful marriage. He sees to it that I'm well taken care of, want for nothing, and is a gentle lover who makes me scream in delight. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and no woman could ever be happier.